Hello and welcome to this Committee of the Whole workshop meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. Tonight we're gathered to dive more deeply into rainwater management financial plan matters. And in this workshop, we hope to discover just how we're going to, the ways in which we can deal with the problem of future rainwater management. I ask if I note that Councillor Longo is regrets, and I ask if any members of council would like to declare a pecuniary interest. And I don't see any, Madam Clerk, so with that, we can proceed to tonight's discussions, and we'll turn our attention to Commissioner Phoebe Fu.
Great. Hello. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. We do have a presentation, so maybe we could pull up the introduction presentation. Thank you. Wonderful. Great. Good evening. I'd just like to provide some opening remarks for our workshop today. We are here today to have a conversation with Council regarding the town-wide rainwater management financial plan and the work from staff from Asset Management, Finance Department, and our consulting partners have been doing for the past several months. Climate change mitigation and adaptation is one of the Council's strategic priorities. The Rainwater Management Financial Plan ties directly to Council's strategic priorities by managing climate change risk and build resiliency in our stormwater network. The intent of the Rainwater Management Financial Plan is to apply a risk, cost, benefit, and service impact lens to all the stormwater infrastructure and natural asset studies, and the recommendations has been done, and develop a prioritized long-term stormwater needs, roadmap, and supporting financial plan. Over the past several months, the town has been exploring options for a sustainable funding source to ensure stormwater infrastructure is maintained in a state of good repair and improvements are made to adapt to climate change. The objective of the funding source will be one that is affordable, equitable, simple to understand, and provides financial sustainability. Today is the first of the series of workshops that we will be having with you. Tonight, we will be starting with the introduction by Catherine, Director of Asset Management. Then we have invited our partners from Conservation Halton, TRCA, to speak on the roles of green versus gray infrastructure. We will pause briefly for any questions related to their presentation. Then we'll follow by a presentation from AECOM, our consultant, to provide an introduction of stormwater funding and outline the education engagement plan. And then finally, Catherine will come back and provide a wrap-up regarding the next steps. We're very pleased today to have with us our key partners. Conservation Halton staff, Barb Vail is the Acting Chief Administrative Officer and Senior Director, Watershed Management and Climate Change for Conservation Halton, where she has worked since 2013. In her role as Senior Director, Barb leads an interdisciplinary team who undertakes and delivers climate change initiatives and watershed planning, watershed monitoring and restoration activities, source water protection, Lake Ontario initiatives, and the Hamilton Harbor Remediation Action Program. Barb is a registered professional planner and has her PhD in geography. Leslie Maddock, I'm sorry, I'm not saying your last name correctly, Maddock, is a manager of science and monitoring. She in the Watershed Management and Climate Change Department. She's been with CH for 18 years in various roles. Her background's in ecology, specifically plants and wetlands. We're also very delighted to have staff from TRCA here in support of this. Steve OJ is a water resource engineer and qualified teacher in Ontario. He is a senior manager of the Sustainable Technologies Evaluation Program, STEP, at the Toronto Region Conservation Authority. Steve's effort working with an integrated team of water and energy leaders and specialists has been focused on developing and implementing new legislation, regulation policies, and best practices related to low-impact development, LID, stormwater management in support of better site design, implementation, inspection, and maintenance prioritizations. From TRCA, we also have Sharon Lamb here with us. She is a research scientist with the Ecosystem and Climate Science team at TRCA. Sharon works to advance climate science and adaptation through a range of collaborative, multi-stakeholder projects in the Toronto region and beyond. She supports the delivery of risk-based adaptation services through applied research project implementation, technical advisory, partnership development, and knowledge mobilization. To assist us with the development of the rainwater management financial plan, we hire AECOM, a multidisciplinary engineering consulting firm. We have with us today, Pippi Warburton is a senior project manager, a senior water resource engineer, and AECOM lead for water resources in Canada. Pippi has more than 24 years of experience, including managing complex projects that involve coordination of multidisciplinary teams with many stakeholders such as funding agencies, conservation authorities, municipalities, and advisory committees. She also regularly undertakes inventory of water courses and facilities that include survey and assessment work that lead to risk assessment and prioritization of maintenance work, followed by detailed design of mitigation and retrofit works. Pippi has also led numerous community engagement programs and worked with all stakeholders in municipal and provincial environmental assessment for surface water-related projects. Pippi has worked as a project manager for stormwater funding study for 7 municipalities across Ontario: Guelph, which includes an implementation phase, Thunder Bay, Ajax, Sudbury, Brantford, Sault Ste. Marie, Barrie, and is also an advisor to the ongoing Hamilton study. These studies all included rate development, public stakeholder advisory group consultation, assistance with development of bylaws, and credit program development. We also have Alicia Evans, I believe she's on Zoom, is the manager of community engagement and communication for AECOM, and is the lead on the public consultation engagement program for this project. With those introductions, I will pass it over to Catherine.
Oops. Thanks, Phoebe. So good evening. Welcome, everyone. So the purpose of the workshop today is to provide a bit more information on the roles of green and gray infrastructure and the impacts of climate change, provide an overview of the stormwater funding options available and the considerations, as well as outline the education and engagement plan roadmap. So as far as the agenda today, I will start off by providing a bit of a recap of the work we've done to date. Then we will pass it over to the conservation authorities to provide some more information on the green and gray infrastructure, how they work together, as well as climate change and how they impact our stormwater infrastructure. Then we will have AECOM speak to the importance of stormwater management, the different ways we can fund stormwater, and provide an overview of the stormwater feasibility study and process. So stormwater management is an essential service that the town provides. It is crucial in protecting public safety, to reduce flood risk, control erosion, and maintain water quality in the local natural waterways. The town manages stormwater runoff from rainfall events and snowmelt by ensuring a network of stormwater infrastructure and natural assets are in place and functioning properly. Different areas of the town may experience different types of flooding, such as riverine, lake, or urban flooding. Each type of flooding is controlled through various types of infrastructure, natural assets, low-impact development that work together to provide protection as a whole to the community. Jurisdiction over the different types of infrastructure is shared between the town, the conservation authorities, and the region, with all three having an important role to play. The town has had a stormwater network in place for over 50 years that we continue to maintain and enhance as design standards change and evolve over time. The town has completed many capital works already, and additional improvements and renewal works are planned for over the next 10 years. We continue to build on the work already completed to date and plan into the future. In March of 2023, staff presented an overview of the town-wide rainwater management plan roadmap. The rainwater management financial plan considers needs for all stormwater-related infrastructure and natural assets, such as our pipes, shoreline, harbors, creeks, stormwater ponds, culverts, and ditches, and the necessary ongoing work and improvements that are essential to help mitigate the flooding, control erosion, reduce pollution, and maintain our water quality. This multi-phase plan builds on previously completed work to provide an integrated approach to planning and implementing stormwater-related infrastructure into the future. This plan will prioritize the recommendations from studies to deliver a long-term plan for infrastructure renewal and improvement needs. As Phoebe mentioned, the Asset Management Department has been taking the lead role on this plan, but has been collaborating with the Transportation Engineering, Parks and Open Spaces, and Finance departments. So this rainwater management plan is a multi-year project that encompasses 3 phases. Phase 1 was to identify the needs, which include data collection from the various fundamental studies and life cycle needs assessments. This phase tells us what the value of the improvements we need for each asset category. Phase 2, prioritization of the needs and development of a long-term plan, involved developing a prioritization framework based on cost-benefit and risk analysis. Then using this framework to evaluate all the needs and produce a long-term capital plan. Work on Phase 1 and Phase 2 has been completed, with 3 reports reported to Council in 2023. So we are now in Phase 3, the financing plan, feasibility study, and implementation stage. This includes the development and assessment of various funding options to support the delivery of the long-term plan and to develop public engagement and communication strategy, as well as a fee implementation plan. So based on our work in Phase 1, there are 2 distinct streams of work that have been identified under the umbrella of the Rainwater Management Plan, totaling $640 million. Each stream addresses different needs, service objectives, and has different risks associated. Stream 1 is the life cycle needs. It's focused on maintaining our existing infrastructure in a state of good repair, which is essential in protecting our stormwater network to ensure it functions properly. The objective of Stream 2 initiatives is to help us understand the extent of the vulnerability in different areas and develop options to enhance the town's existing stormwater network to provide more resiliency against climate change. As part of complying with OREG 588-17, municipalities were required to prepare asset management plans for their core assets by July 2022. This work, coupled with the Rainwater Management Plan, has provided us with a long-term outlook on our stormwater infrastructure needs to provide an understanding of the current service being provided, assess the risks, and begin to plan into the future to determine where we need to go next with regards to our stormwater management. Under Phase 2, a 30-year capital plan has been developed where all the recommendations within the 2 streams have been reviewed and prioritized across the entire network to maximize the benefit and create the most resiliency possible in a cost-effective manner. Staff leveraged existing policies and data to develop a framework in order to evaluate and prioritize the various recommendations on a continuum based on the type of project versus the likelihood of service impact and the risk. By using this framework, infrastructure in the poorest condition or climate adaptation initiatives with the largest service impact or highest risk areas would generally be planned for first. Based on the prioritization framework, initiatives from the different streams of work have been phased over a 30-year period to address the high priority needs in the early years. The maintenance category represents the ongoing annual operation maintenance, inspections, and repairs. As you can see, the actual amount required has peaks and valleys over the 30-year period. However, on average, the annual need totals $21.3 million per year. As part of phase 2 of the strategy, a high-level assessment of the affordability of the recommended program was completed to determine the impact on town funding sources. The town has had a long history of developing 10-year capital plans for infrastructure renewal of our assets. Therefore, a portion of Stream 1, State of Good Repair needs, has been included in the forecast, and existing town funding has been allocated based on the previous capital plans. The current capital forecast includes an annual average of $8.9 million in existing funding for stormwater infrastructure. This leads an unfunded amount of $12.4 million when compared to the $21.3 that's been identified. This shortfall is primarily related to the climate improvement projects. As it currently stands, none of these projects are in our capital forecast. Based on the existing 2024 capital forecast, the annual capital levy is already fully allocated to capital projects over the 10-year period. Therefore, for the purposes of assessing the affordability of this rainwater management plan, Finance first focused the assessment of the affordability of the funding from the capital reserve. The blue line in this chart illustrates the ending capital reserve balance that was projected as part of the 2024 capital forecast and includes needs from all program areas. The green line shows the result if the $12.4 million in additional funding we need to support the rainwater management plan were to be fully funded from the reserve without any alternative funding source. As you can see, the capital reserve balance would fall below zero in 2026 and continue to decline. It's important to note that in this scenario, it assumes that the funding allocated to all the other program areas is maintained at the same level as previously forecasted, and no projects have been deferred or reduced. The use of debt was also considered as part of the preliminary assessment, but it would not be a long-term option as the town would exceed the recommended debt levels. This chart illustrates the rainwater management plan's scope of work within the overall process and how it fits in with the grand scheme. Essentially, there are three components. There's the studies and recommendations in the orange, rainwater management planning, evaluation, and funding analysis in the blue, and project implementation stage in green. The overall objective of the rainwater management plan is to develop a financing plan that will provide a sustainable funding source to protect the town's existing infrastructure and natural assets, as well as to incorporate enhancements to build resiliency and help adapt to climate change. The projects will still need to be approved by council as part of the annual budget process, where they would then move on to the project implementation stage to begin more detailed design, evaluation of options, public consultation, and eventually construction. In this respect, the rainwater management plan is similar to how a development charges study is undertaken. Recommendations from various master plans are analyzed and evaluated to determine a long-term plan, and the total value of the infrastructure to support growth. Analysis is then completed to determine the recovered amount from development fees to determine the DC charge that's required over the period. As such, this rainwater management plan is not a static plan. While it's currently based on information from the existing studies, the capital plan and funding levels will need to be revised as we go forward on a cyclical basis in order to capture changing needs from future studies and detailed project designs. So as I mentioned, staff have brought forward a number of reports last year on the rainwater management plan to date. At the September 2023 meeting, staff committed to coming back this year to provide an update on stormwater funding options and the implementation plan. The focus for today is to hear from our partners as they provide additional information for you, a high-level overview of the stormwater funding considerations and principles, and in addition, they will outline the public education and engagement plan. This engagement plan will be integral to help inform the public not only what we're doing with regards to stormwater financing, but why. And with that, that ends my presentation, and I will pass it over to Barb Veal from Conservation Halton to say a few words.
Mr. Mayor and council members, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I was asked to say just a few introductory comments to sort of set the stage for the presentation from TRCA, and also to talk a little bit about how Conservation Halton is involved in green infrastructure and in natural assets. So just as a very high overview, the purpose of conservation authorities, and it's the same across Ontario, is to provide for the organization and delivery of programs and services that further the conservation, restoration, development, and management of natural resources in watersheds in Ontario. So over 60 years, Conservation Halton has delivered programs to communities dealing with natural hazards such as flooding, drought, and erosion, managed and restored natural resources and biodiversity in our watersheds, protect drinking water sources, monitored environmental conditions, trends, and risks within the watershed, and as well as created opportunities to connect nature through recreation and education. So as you probably know, our jurisdiction includes multiple watersheds. I formerly worked at the Grand River Conservation Authority, one large river with a lot of tributaries going into the main stem. So when I moved over to Conservation Halton, I had to get used to the fact that we had 3 main creeks, Grindstone, 16 Mile, and Bronte Creek, and also many, many little fingers, little urban creeks that run off of the escarpment and into Lake Ontario, and I believe that Oakville has about 8 of those little creeks. Our jurisdiction also includes 51 kilometers of shoreline, and it extends 2 kilometers out into the lake, and that's something that people maybe wouldn't realize. So we do have some regulatory responsibilities into the lake, and I'm not really sure what it is because our legislation doesn't really say. It just says this is the extent. TRCA has the same thing. And since watersheds often extend across multiple municipal boundaries and responsibility for managing natural hazards and resources is shared, as was stated by Catherine. Yes, sorry, Catherine. I knew it. We need to work together. So I'm pleased to be here to talk a little bit about how Conservation Authority may be able to support the town of Oakville in implementing your rainwater management plan. So today, as was stated, you'll be hearing from representatives from TRCA and also from Leslie Maddich, who is a manager of science and monitoring at Conservation Halton. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about our involvement. So CH is involved in promoting and advising on green infrastructure as part of the municipal stormwater management strategies through its review of planning applications and technical studies. And we also promote and undertake low-impact development projects on both public and private land, and we monitor their performance. In 2020, we partnered with the National Natural Assets Initiative out of BC to study the benefits and values of natural assets in managing stormwater in the Grindstone Creek watershed, which flows through Hamilton and Burlington. Our recent study for the watershed estimated that the cost to replace the stormwater services provided by natural assets in the watershed, so that is reducing peak flows and allowing for infiltration, is approximately $2 billion. And that's in 2023 dollars. It was also estimated that the value of other benefits provided by the natural assets in that watershed, such as erosion control, carbon storage and sequestration, and recreation, was about $34 million annually. So I think the study illustrates how important natural assets are in buffering the impacts of climate change and moderating downstream flows. And in developed areas, green infrastructure is being increasingly integrated into the traditional municipal stormwater management approaches. So at this point in time, I would like to ask Sharon and Steve to come forward and make their presentation. And I know, Leslie, you'll be saying a few words. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, distinguished council, municipal staff, partners, other Conservation Authority partners. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm Steve Auger, again, the Senior Manager of the Sustainable Technologies Evaluation Program with the Toronto Region Conservation Authority. We were sharing stories a little bit about different conservation authorities, our purpose, how we collaborate and partner together. Barb shared a few. Notable for me is I have just joined the Toronto Region Authority from the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. I was there for almost 10 years, focusing in that jurisdiction, but working with the Sustainable Technologies Evaluation Partnership for that whole duration. So I am not, I'm transferable, so are we all, and we like to support each other. So again, thank you for having us this evening. I'm gonna need my glasses to check my speaking notes as we continue, so excuse me. So I'm gonna focus on green infrastructure in a bit more detail, what it is. Some of you might know a bit more about it than others. Some of the terms you've probably heard. And then Sharon's gonna rally and talk about the climate change implications on stormwater infrastructure. So to begin with, green infrastructure, it is the plant and the mechanical, the biological components that allow us to explore environmental, health, social, economic benefits for our communities. The terms that I would presume you might have heard are rain gardens, rain barrels, permeable pavements, taking more of a surgence in many jurisdictions, urban jurisdictions. But then there's some other terms that I'm going to get into that you might not have heard as much. And so the focus with stormwater management and green infrastructure is really the component is low impact development. It is the different mechanical and biological processes in stormwater infrastructure that allow us to treat the stormwater at the source as opposed to let it get pushed downstream and out of sight. It helps us also emulate the natural processes that existed during pre-development conditions. And when I came into the role 10 years ago in the Lake Simcoe jurisdiction, one thing I did remind everybody is low-impact development's not really new. What's new and great is we're putting more of an emphasis on it. We're treating it with respect and giving it credit in our designs. We're trying to integrate our designs more. And so some other terms and visuals you see on the slide are green roofs, exfiltration systems, tried, true, and tested for over 30 years in Etobicoke. There are other concepts now, tree trenches, tree pits that are taking hold everywhere in Toronto where you can find some space in the urban core. There's pre-treatment elements to low-impact development that are important and integrated within the whole treatment train of this type of approach. And there's also the underground components you don't see, like tanks, but that also promote that infiltration that's tied to low-impact development. So the history lesson in the beginning is going back to the ponds. And ironically here, I was in this building as a young designer focusing on a pond and an assumption of a pond. I was sharing this with Pippi before the deputation here at the workshop, and Sharon. I was here probably 20 or so years ago as a younger practitioner. And the ponds themselves, they're part of that history lesson from the 80s when we focused on quantity control and conveyance. And then to the 90s, we started to realize, well, we need quality control. We need to treat the water too, to reduce the impacts on the receiving water. And the birth and the surgence of the wet pond occurred. And it has a nice aesthetic. It was working well with development communities. The challenge was with the wet ponds. They do control rates. They do help get flows back to pre-development conditions. They do take the pollutants and capture them and control that. But then there's also the maintenance that's required. And on the next slide here, what to illustrate is that they're pushed in a development, whether it's retrofit or new, to the side, to the corners, to the downstream or the end of the system. And that has some benefits in terms of developable land and maybe a nice aesthetic tied to a green corridor or trail. The challenge with that too is sometimes they're forgotten. They're pushed aside in a way. And the concept we've been really promoting and building momentum on is to come full circle and give more of an integrated approach, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, to stormwater management, incorporating low-impact development, other green infrastructure aspects where opportunities exist, respecting there are constraints. There's always going to be constraints. You can't put things everywhere. There's soil conditions and existing infrastructure and other departments and services and infrastructure that are priorities too, but you need to work together to try to coordinate that as best as possible. And so the idea of having the source control or the low impact development and things like bioretention, which is the common term for rain gardens and bioswales and what's green and biological and supports animals and the birds and the bees. That's the bioretention elements. That connected to the conveyance, the ditches, the conventional storm sewers that are also known as gray infrastructure, that can still be part of the system. But then within those elements, when you need to rehabilitate them or improve them or upsize them, build the capacity so they can treat or convey larger storms, you can look at the opportunity to put some of that water back into the ground. So that's the idea of bringing more low impact development into that step. And then the end of pipe scenario where instead of just having the wet ponds like we did in the 80s, there's still opportunity to turn public usable space like we have in areas, so that they do exist everywhere, the dry ponds, but put more of an emphasis on that again, where we use this for quantity control, but we can also see the maintenance issue. We can see the problems immediately and we can address them. And the public can help us with that if we build the right programs. So the idea here again, in moving forward with green infrastructure and the momentum we're building, and it is there in the province, thanks to also support from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, which should be acknowledged, who's being part of the paradigm shift, defining low impact development as a priority and a good way to integrate stormwater management and solve our challenges, is to get back to taking the left side of the screen and dealing with our development pressures, but emulating the conditions you get from the greener pre-development natural system. So we've been also asked to talk about how the conservation authorities experience and support these types of projects. And I'm happy to tell the story of Sustainable Technologies Evaluation Program, which I'm managing. As a young practitioner, I was aware of STEP, as it's also referred to, and as a grad student, actually, when I was at the University of Guelph, because the program used to be called SWAMP before STEP. But then the Ministry of the Environment changed the management structure, asked the Toronto Region Conservation Authority to actually lead and still continue to provide funding. And that all happened in 2004. So ironically, that was the year I got into practice, the year after I got into practice. So I was already using the materials, using and adapting, and as a young practitioner, supporting that through my opportunities in design. And so were all the partners. We were building different case studies and evaluating stormwater management. And that was the focus of STEP in the early days, is to evaluate the ponds, the concepts with low impact development, monitor, put out accurate information, try to help inform better practice. But it has evolved into the low impact development, complete evaluation, putting out design tools, planning tools, the advocacy and like engagement at workshops like tonight, and then hosting workshops for practitioners. We also had the opportunity, which is something I led, to start a pilot program in the Lake Simcoe region area in 2019 that led to a province-wide annual initiative funded by the Ministry of the Environment, which focuses on stormwater management, inspection, maintenance, prioritization, which we're going to be talking about throughout the evening. And we have municipalities come from all over that are interested. We choose several sites in Ontario every year for pond inspection maintenance training and low impact development inspection maintenance training, and then bring everybody back together. And what's great about it is municipal managers that have 20 years, 25 years, 30 years are still coming back to learn more and to share more stories. And that's the point of it. There's always more to learn as the practitioners go through working with this infrastructure. We also recognize there's a technical gap, and we've been offering different levels of service to municipalities to help build capacity with their teams, better knowledge translation, and to deal with the infrastructure prioritization, and then step back when asked to. So that's a bit of the mission that the Sustainable Technologies Evaluation Program is currently on, and I foresee it to continue for the years ahead, until there is more funding and resource for municipalities to deal with this shift. Training and outreach I've mentioned before, the pond training. We do offer different types of annual training for low impact development design. And we also have a website and a wiki that provides all this information for designers and planners and people trying to justify using low impact development versus other stormwater management design in their plans, in their implementation. So that's another thing STEP does. And I hope that gives you a sense of where green infrastructure is at and how we're supporting it as a Conservation Authority collaborative. I'm going to pass the conch now to my colleague Sharon, who's going to talk a bit about climate change and how we're addressing the stress on stormwater infrastructure. So over to you now, Sharon. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank, once again, town staff for the invitation to speak here tonight, and thank you, Barb, for the great introduction. Steve has now walked us through what is green stormwater infrastructure and the role that green and gray infrastructure can play in integrated stormwater management. Now I'd like to shift our focus a little bit to talk about what this all means under our changing climate. Our first key message is that our existing infrastructure was built to perform well in a climate that no longer exists. This will affect our ability to provide services at current levels into the future. This graph may be familiar to many of you. The cost of insured catastrophic losses in Canada have been rising, but the real cost of damages is likely much higher, given that this graph doesn't include uninsured losses and less tangible impacts, such as mental health impacts and the disturbances to social fabric of communities. And these impacts are also not being felt equally. Vulnerable populations are being disproportionately impacted by climate change, making equity central to adaptation and resilience planning. At the national level, a climate change assessment has found that Canada is warming at roughly twice the global rate. Some areas in the north is warming 3 to even maybe 4 times as fast. As air gets warmer, it can also hold more moisture to produce storms. So overall, on average, precipitation is also increasing in many parts of the country. With every additional increment of global warming, the climate will get even hotter, wetter, and wilder. The consequences for people, ecosystems, and economies grow larger as warming increases. Global surface temperatures have already warmed by more than 1 degree Celsius, and higher levels of global warming will put more people at risk of displacement and lead to trillions of dollars in potential damages globally. Here we have maps showing anticipated temperature and precipitation changes across the globe under global warming levels ranging from 1.5 to 4 degrees Celsius. Limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius in line with Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to 2 degrees Celsius and ideally to 1.5 will require rapid and sustained social and economic transformation. The more we delay action, the harder it will be to attain this goal and avoid even more devastating impacts of climate change. Based on TRCA's analysis of observed historical climate data, we found that Toronto is getting warmer and wetter. Oakville has likely seen similar trends. We have temperature stripes showing 175 years of measured historical temperature data from a local climate station within the city of Toronto, starting from 1849 on the left to 2023 on the right. Each colored stripe represents the difference in annual average temperature compared to the average over the entire 20th century. Red means warmer than average, and blue means cooler than average. So as we can see, local temperatures are getting progressively warmer and faster in recent decades. And this is recorded within the City of Toronto. At the bottom, we have precipitation stripes with green meaning wetter than average and brown meaning drier than average. And precipitation trends are a bit more variable than temperature, showing that wetter and drier than average conditions are possible. Based on climate projections developed by Oakville, Burlington, and ICLEI Canada, the town's future climate is anticipated to get warmer, wetter, windier, and wilder, similar to many southern Ontario municipalities. More extreme heat events are also anticipated, which puts everyone's health at risk, and some more than others. The impacts of climate change are already being felt. In Oakville and elsewhere, the costs to local communities are rising. And these are just a few examples of past events that you may remember from a quick online search, including the 2013 ice storm, which caused widespread power outages across the GTA, 2017 rainstorm that led to a small section of the bank of 16 Mile Creek to slide into the creek, 2017 high lake levels, and again in 2019, which led to widespread flooding and erosion that impacted many Great Lakes communities. Climate change is changing the context in which municipal assets and infrastructure systems must operate, adding to the risks that need to be managed by municipal asset managers. At the organizational level, climate-related risks may include physical risks, transition risks, liability and litigation risks, reputational risks, and financial risks. Physical risks have perhaps received the most focus, and these include acute shocks such as flooding and ice storms, as well as chronic stresses such as warmer winters and drier summers that can directly or indirectly impact our municipal assets and infrastructure systems. Transition risks are associated with the transition to a low-carbon economy, and risks may include the potential for more stringent environmental regulations such as carbon pricing and disclosure requirements, shifts in markets, and the emergence of new technologies, which may lead to the risk of stranded assets, assets that suffer a loss in value or become liabilities. Litigation and liability risks are not new, but what we're seeing is more climate change-related litigation, which may include failing to protect people, property, and infrastructure from more extreme weather events. An organization's reputation may also be at risk in the face of changing social norms, public needs or demands, and mismatched expectations. Finally, financial risks may include increased cost of damages, limited availability and increased cost of insurance, as we're seeing in some states in the US, diminished ability to attract investments, and supply chain impacts. Drilling down now to the risks to stormwater infrastructure more specifically, here are some potential climate impacts on gray stormwater infrastructure, such as increased storm sewer backups, increased overtopping of roads and increased closures, increased maintenance and inspection needs for catch basins and culverts, for example, increased damages due to extreme heat leading to cracking and buckling, increased damages and service disruptions due to flooding, erosion, and extreme weather events, and decreased asset durability and lifespan. For green stormwater infrastructure, examples of potential climate impacts include reduced water quality and increase in harmful algal blooms that may pose a threat to people's health, increased flooding and erosion along creeks, streams, and Lake Ontario, as we saw in previous years, increased water stress with hotter and drier summers and possibly more drought affecting trees and vegetation, and increased spread of invasive species and pests affecting trees and woodland health. As the impacts of climate change continue to accelerate, we need to build climate resiliency into our infrastructure systems and services. Gray and green stormwater infrastructure can work together to increase climate resiliency. Here is an example of an integrated green and gray approach at the street level. This illustration cuts the street right down the middle to show the above ground and below ground infrastructure. Not only do we have pipes running underneath the road to carry rainwater, we also have a swale beside the road to catch the rainwater where it falls and allow it to infiltrate into the ground. We have boulevards planted with trees that also serve as a rain garden and are equipped with passively irrigated tree pit to promote tree growth and survival. Permeable paving and porous pipes further enhance this integrated green and gray approach, stormwater management approach. In closing, we just like to leave off with this final message that integrated solutions are needed. Green infrastructure can help complement gray infrastructure while providing many other community benefits. Thank you, and just before we open the floor to any questions, we're pleased to invite our colleague Leslie from Conservation Halton to say a few words.
Mr. Mayor and council members, town staff, and fellow Conservation Authority members as well. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with a very high-level overview of monitoring that's happening at Conservation Halton right now. We've recently undergone a reorganizational change, and it's primarily focused in on our monitoring and restoration work that we do. As part of this reorganization and refocus, we're looking at our monitoring program. What are we collecting? Why are we collecting it? And how does it inform our essential programs and services? Is it the right data? And if it's not, what else do we need to do? We're also looking at opportunities to partner with our municipalities to find out what their monitoring needs are and what their access to data is. We're looking at expanding our water quality and LID monitoring as well. We are participating within the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network, and we take on different water quality testing throughout the organizational watershed, but there's definitely areas of growth that we can improve upon. We also monitor LIDs that Conservation Halton implements specific to performance measures. And we've recently joined and are participating within the Greater Golden Horseshoe Conservation Authority's STEP Collaborative. So we're making very specific decisions and efforts to improve upon the monitoring that we are doing to address water quality within the watershed. This fall, we're hoping to engage with town staff at the town of Oakville, as well as our other municipal partners, to figure out what their needs are with respect to data, with respect to monitoring, and how we can better collaborate together and to create a more comprehensive monitoring system for the watershed. Very quickly in closing, we have on our webpage at the end of this month a summary of all of the monitoring that Conservation Halton does across the organization. That was prepared as part of the monitoring summary for the watershed-based resource management strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matic, and to all the other presenters. I found it very, very edifying and extremely comprehensive. The second presentation by TRCA reminded me of a speech I attended given by Dave Phillips, the one-time Environment Canada climate guy. He said what you said, but with very dramatic, grabby video and clips, and he wound up by saying, we will never get the weather genie back in the bottle, even if we stop climate change. That's how far down the road we are. And I invoke that because I sense in all of you the sense of urgency that your awareness of this has created in you. And we do need to increase the sense of urgency in the public, I know. Although many of our community leaders are with us, with the council and you, in that sense of urgency. The first question that you've earned will come from Councillor Elgar. He, by way of introduction to you, if you folks at TRCA probably already know him, but he's been on the board of Conservation Halton for forever and a day. I hesitate to name the number of years for fear of getting it wrong, but maybe Alan, you can tell us. Alan, you have the floor. You just don't have a mic that works.
Mayor Burton, can you hear me okay? Okay, so
we've got you now, yes.
Fantastic presentations, and it's about time that everybody saw this. It's just too bad every resident in Oakville isn't watching tonight, because these numbers are amazing. Slide 41, can we go back to slide 41? Because what I really want to know with slide 41, is there anywhere in Toronto where you can tell me where you're actually doing this and how it's working? That's the one. Well, back, slide 41, or page 41 on mine anyway. It's the green and gray. That's the one. Like that is big time important of where we're going to be going with Midtown, because what I'm finding right now, you drive around the plazas in in Ward 4, right at Dorval and North Service Road. The trees were in there. There isn't a tree left in there. It's just a few flowers they stick in now because the trees didn't survive up there where they built them. Third line and upper middle, the plaza up there, we put in trees with site plan. The trees were there. There isn't any trees because they couldn't survive. We're in an urban area, and I'm just trying to figure out how we do it differently going forward, because we've done a lot in the last number of years of having more cubic meters of earth so the tree has a chance of survival. But when I look at that picture, I'm wondering, is that reality, or is that just another fancy picture to show that after 8 years you just replant again another tree?
Through the mayor and the chair, thank you. Great question, Councillor Elgar. This is not just fantasy. This is happening in many streets already in the city of Toronto. I have to give a shout out to the Green Streets Transportation Services team there that are great partners, and we're working with them on an annual basis, evaluating streets like this, sharing lessons learned and how better to construct these elements and help the trees survive more. It's going to be a journey. It's an ongoing journey. One thing we were just talking to that team about the other week was developing annual training, field training, and modules online for new staff coming on, for councils, for different audiences within their organization to help the program continue to flourish and grow. So that's one example. I hope that I saw some more hands went up. So I'll pass it back to the chair.
Can you give me an example of a few streets in Toronto where I can drive and take a look to make sure this is actually happening?
Yes, through the chair. Yes, I can. One example is down on Lakeshore. There's a few pockets down on Lakeshore where there's been segments like this implemented. Another is by the Flatiron building, if you know where that is, and there's a really cool fountain with all the dogs and a lot of public typically there. Along the north side of Wellington, there is elements of what we see on this slide there as well.
Well, I really appreciate the presentations that both of you have put on tonight, because we have to get there. But I think the most shocking is the idea that climate change isn't happening. It's real, and this is a great presentation. I appreciate that was being done tonight, and I'm not sure how we're going to get there, though. I wonder about our grandchildren going forward, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Ms. Hewitt?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to add that we do have somewhat of an example of that on our own Lakeshore Road, where we've implemented those tree pits and around the trees down in Lakeshore in our downtown area. So we continue to look at doing that more often as we've been developing more of those streetscapes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hudson. And Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation, and I'm fully in agreement with the integration of the water resiliency for gray and green infrastructure. That slide 41, I think is we were alluding to. I know for a fact with Vancouver's done a major roadways with that kind of integrated system. I think it's appropriate time, and with respect to the streetscapes happening on Kerr Street and Bronte, that one thing that I did bring up with the consultants is something exactly like this, to start moving in that direction with our development streetscape, but also under the ground, and bring the green and the gray together to make it more formidable for Kerr Street. And I'm hoping, talking with Councillor Mera and looking at and McNeese with respect to Bronte too, I think it's an appropriate time to look at this development for those two streetscapes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Great presentation. Question regarding dry ponds and wet ponds. I believe you said in the mid-'80s, dry dry ponds were being used more and more. Has that changed over to greater use of wet ponds? Just curious in terms of how that's occurred.
Thank you. Through the chair and mayor, Councillor Giddens. I hope I said that right.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, no, the good question about the history, and we do like to tell the history lesson every time because it does show how practice evolves, standards evolve, ways of thinking evolve. The dry ponds in the 80s started to focus on the opportunity where it existed. So if a tributary even had a lower depressed area and there was opportunity to expand it to create more volume control, then they would do that. That there are dry ponds you would look at today, everybody, and think, well, they call that a dry pond. There's a lot of water there. But it's the technical element of it where you have space for the water to rise and fall and a complete ability for it to flow out. A lot of dry ponds are dry, but not all of them. So I don't want to throw you off on that, but to your point, Councillor, there's a lot of these historic dry ponds where that was occurring, right? Because there wasn't as much regulated focus back then, so you were more permitted to do those things in design. We don't allow that anymore, and good on us to do that. So the dry pond conversation's gone full circle, but like I can happily say I live in Newmarket, and behind my home is a big dry pond that's solving a lot of flood control with low impact development in the area upstream. Not like slide 41 of the streetscape, but where the opportunities existed. Thank you.
I think in area of Oakville, Clearview, early 80s development, there is a dry pond, which is a public park and a full-size soccer field on that. There's another SWMP above and below quite a distance. Is that the kind of thing, depending on the topography, and as you said, whether it's, if it's straight stormwater, that we should be looking at? It doesn't cost the developer in terms of losing space if it becomes our parkland. Is that something that makes sense?
Through the chair and mayor, yes, Councillor Giddens, that's exactly the type of idea we're going for with integrating the gray, which is still needed with the green. And there are developers out there that will testify, you know, I was still able to build the homes or more homes that I wanted to, but I was able to create a public amenity, a park space, putting a tank underneath it, or where the opportunity existed, turning the topography into what Councillor Giddens highlighted. That's another good example that has occurred over the decades. So we should give credit to different councils and design teams where it's due. It's not like it hasn't happened where people did seize the opportunity. We're still just saying, let's do it more again, and let's do it better.
Well, normally when we look at POPs, they tend to be concrete. I think would be wonderful to see ones that are green. In terms, we're looking at numbers 30 years out, with the cost of infrastructure, as we see later in the report, being so high. What level of accuracy, because this climate change thing seems to be sticking around and we're making forecasts on it in terms of what's to come. The further you go out, the more difficult it is. Do we have a variance in there? Do we have a percentage? Do we realize that we're just going to have to come back and look at it as weather events occur?
Let's turn that over to our Director of Finance.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the $640 million is based on the current estimates that we have from our studies. You are right, that will change over time, and that's why we've noted that we need to continue to, every so many years, reevaluate what our needs are, what the value of those needs are, and what the financing plan should be to sustain it. We're planning on that we need to possibly look at an every 5 years type of cycle, similar to a DC study, because we know that those costs and those needs can change probably quite rapidly. So that is something we've highlighted in our plans.
And the plan stated we needed additional $12.4 million a year. That's the gap in terms of what's required. Are all those numbers have an inflation projection in that, or is that 2024 dollars?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they were in 2022 dollars at the time, so they're already a bit outdated.
And so that's 2022 all the way through. So
Correct,
the
yes.
actual, that 12.4 million could be a lot more.
Could grow, yes.
I think it has. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you very much. Just a few questions. So why hasn't some of this stuff been able to make its way into the Ontario Building Code, whether it be green roofs on tower designs, whether it be permeable driveways in new areas? I mean, it seems like it's a bit of a no-brainer when we're doing this. So why hasn't it been able to make its way into the building code?
I'm going to suggest that's probably a good question to the provincial government. It's one you have actually on your advocacy piece. And I know the Ministry of Municipal Affairs working with the building officials look at the building code on a regular basis. It has been a recent push to bring in more sustainable standards. It hasn't happened to the extent I think that we were all looking for. There has been changes to the City of Toronto legislation that allows them to do some of those green roof or other infrastructure pieces more easily. And that hasn't also been spread to other municipalities. So it's an excellent question, but it really is a question that sits with the provincial government, and anything we can do to advocate for those kinds of standards to come into the building code, or changes in our own municipal abilities, such as some of the changes in the City of Toronto, would be very beneficial to us.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I was looking from a staff, from a conservation authority. Maybe you guys have had some insight into provincial building, other cohorts on that side, and they could speak to that. I know politically sometimes we can never get the ball across the goal lines, but anyway, maybe I'll park that. If you want to got an answer, that would be great. But I'm from a staff level, because that's really where this comes from. I mean, staff people at some point have to agree with conservation authorities. They might not agree with municipalities, but maybe from a staff level.
Through the chair and mayor, the Councillor O'Meara, great questions, and I do appreciate where you're coming from. I think not being an expert with green roofs, there's been more advancement there, so I'd encourage you to look at that more. A good example of what we do through the collaborative, and a shout out to the Credit Valley Conservation Authority, because we haven't really mentioned them tonight as a partner. They share a bit of your jurisdiction in their watershed. They've been leading the Greater Golden Horseshoe initiatives that we're all collaborating on to support green infrastructure. They've initiated, and this is an example of STEP, they were STEP partners, they initiated a blue roof study on their own office building. So you imagine the stakes are high, right? If there's issues, the staff involved, you're gonna hear about it from everybody. But I bring that up as an example because that is helping inform how it can work, lessons learned along the way, changes to the structural codes and elements within the building code to make it work. And they've really made progress. It's now implemented. They're using it for gray water. They're using it for irrigation. It's a good example of addressing resiliency on infrastructure and dealing with climate change. And I'm sure they'd be happy to show you what it's all about. Thank you.
I appreciate that. The next question I have is with the funding model and with what we're going to do here. Councillor McNeese and I had the privilege of attending our first meeting in a park about trying to put in a stormwater pond in an existing neighborhood, and I can tell you it didn't go very well. Most people don't want any change, and they don't want to see their neighborhoods uprooted. So I guess my question is, how are we going to try and do some of this stuff in existing neighborhoods? And secondly, what are we going to do to incentivize people or businesses or buildings or developers Rather than charging people, are we looking at models about waivers or fee reductions or other sort of DC? We've heard DCs already, DC incentives by doing these things. What sort of models or areas are we looking at that maybe have already looked at this, and in terms of just putting it on a tax base or a levy fee? What are we doing to incentivize people to do that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, that is some of what we're looking at through our stormwater feasibility study. So Ms. Pippi Warburton will be speaking a little bit more to that. We are definitely looking at not only just implementing a stormwater fee, but with that, you can incentivize through credit rebates and types of programs that will offer, a bit of a carrot to go and build these types of green infrastructure in their own homes or businesses and whatnot, and then get a possible reduction to their fee. So that's part of, I guess, the beauty of a stormwater fee program.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I did do a little bit of research in Cincinnati and Philadelphia have implemented something along those lines. And yeah, I think, it's almost like we're looking at a cap and trade system as well too, right? Maybe you can do even more than what you need to and offset it and these sorts of things. But I think there's a system out there rather than just putting it on the tax base that might be effective. So look forward to that. Thank you.
Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, through your worship, and thanks to all the delegates, great presentations. Oftentimes the rationale for not doing the green approach or green by default is the additional cost. And, I've looked into green roof projects in the past and, big fan of permeable paving and stuff like that, but oftentimes it costs quite a bit more. But when you do the research on it, especially a green roof, you can extend the life of the existing roof by 2 to 3-fold, but you don't see those costs right up front. So I'm just wondering, are there any other sort of studies or methodologies that help to quantify the benefits? And one of the delegates, I believe, mentioned, the mental health impacts of taking part in a flood and, things like that. If we make some of these investments up front, is it quantifiable, the long-term benefits? Infrastructure is going to last longer. Maybe our occurrence of floods is going to go down, various things like that to help us just understand, 100 million gets 200 million in savings or something like that down the road.
That is a very good question, and it's something I think that we're all striving to learn a bit more about. I think Mrs. Beal from Conservation Halton gave you the one example where they did look at work in Burlington and try to quantify the cost, but it's not an easy thing to do when you start getting into the social benefits and the health benefits. So it's something I think we're all working together to learn a bit more on how to do and how to quantify those benefits and the costs. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting because when you look at natural assets in their natural state, so not necessarily green infrastructure, but you look at the investment that you make, which is probably very low because they're already existing. So it's just keeping them there, and they actually increase in value as opposed to decreasing if they're allowed to continue. And so the costs over time become less and less as the green infrastructure, or the natural assets actually mature. In terms of green infrastructure, that's a different story. And I think the important thing with the STEP program and with the work that TRCA is doing, and as Leslie Maddich indicated, Conservation Halton is participating in becoming, hopefully, a STEP partner as well. But getting the community of practice, looking at examples where it's worked, and keeping track of those so that we can develop a playbook, if you will, of opportunities that can be used. So as more and more municipalities are using this type of green infrastructure, we can gather more and more information. And perhaps, I don't know if Steve wants to add to that. But
Through the chair and mayor, thank you, Barb, great points, and thank you, Councillor, for your question. And this is our ongoing long game journey with studies that support the cost benefits and the economics. We have tried some modeling studies both on the macro and micro scale. The macro in the Lake Simcoe watershed and the East Holland River, looking at solutions and cross-jurisdictional solutions amongst municipalities to share the operation maintenance and the capital costs, and optimizing that, and proven that the model does make sense. It's a cost-sharing model that municipalities could follow, for example, like they do with fire services. But there's a long journey to go there to implement that type of blueprint to get municipalities to cooperate. We've looked at the micro scale in Mississauga and South Down, showing that the aggregation of different infrastructure together to solve the solution reduces the maintenance cost. The challenge I think we're against is, and I think Barb hit it right on the head, is that we need to build the sample size of cost comparisons. And when people do say it's going to cost more, the one challenge I think we have is, well, gray infrastructure, the costs have been up and down because it gets more and less emphasis depending on the budgets and the available resources. So it's hard to do an honest apples to apples comparison. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those answers. And I think even just a reminder of the qualitative of, if we make an investment of 10 million, we're extending the life of a $100 million asset, even if we don't know exactly how much we're saving. But I think that just helps with some of this. And I know there's practices like triple bottom line accounting or full cost accounting that I don't know if they've fully figured out how to cost some of these things, but I think it just, and sustainability and the three-legged stool and all those things, just looking at that whole picture, yes, it's 600 million, but there's many other aspects, that have benefits, can really just help us understand the big picture here. But thank you for those responses.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. I guess a correlation with, and I know we've had discussions with, I don't know if it's crossed our desks with respect to a floodplain map for Oakville. Do we have access to the floodplain maps within Oakville? And how, with $640 million, if we prioritize those areas of high risks in relation to, I know the money, but have we started that analysis at this point in time?
Through Mr. Mayor, there is floodplain maps, sorry, for Oakville. There's floodplain map that is sourced from Conservation Halton, and we also have done a number of riverine studies that look at the spills and the flooding potential. So we took all the variety of studies, not just the riverine ones, but also the harbors and the shorelines and all the different work. As Catherine mentioned, it was in the peach bubble that we evaluated it, and we did prioritize to create that 30-year roadmap. So we do have a total amount as well as a year-by-year prioritization for the next 30 years, and that will lead us to the fee cut discussion at the next presentation.
Thank you.
All right, Council. I sense that we're ready for the third round of this evening, and let's welcome Pippi Warburton, and I look forward to your information.
Great, Mr. Mayor and councillors, thank you very much for allowing me to speak with you tonight. I'm very happy to be here as the project manager for your stormwater fee feasibility study. I'm here really representing a consultant team that has a lot of experience. Our consultant team has done over 20 stormwater fee studies across the country, and I myself has been a project manager for 7 of them here in Ontario. So we bring a lot of experience, but I have to say my overriding comment would be that every municipality is so unique. And you never know what's going to come up through public consultation or just through a different demographic or a different geological or geographical situation. So everyone is unique. They have different priorities and they need a custom fit program. So I'm very happy to be here today representing the consultant team that has that experience to help navigate the team through this, this process. So we've heard a lot tonight about what you need to do and all this wonderful background work that's gone on to summarize what needs to be done and how much we think it's going to cost. That work's been done and been presented to you again tonight. The fee feasibility study is going to talk about how you should fund it, how you can pay for it. So we're going to walk through some of that tonight. I'm going to talk about the stormwater management program, which you've already heard quite a bit about, so I'll go over that very quickly. Then we're going to talk about options for funding stormwater management, just take you through the high-level different options that are available, and then we'll just talk about the study itself that's currently underway. So what is stormwater? I think after our presentations tonight, we all know clearly what stormwater is, but I would like to say from a funding perspective what it is not. It is not drinking water, and it is not wastewater. It's funded differently. It's a very different separate system. It's a different type of engineering, has different infrastructure, and it's funded differently. When you think about drinking water and wastewater, you know there's a meter. It tells you how much you should pay for how much you've used. Well, stormwater is a bit different in that respect. So stormwater comes off, it's rainwater and melted snow that runs over ground, and it runs quicker when it's on a paved area, what we call an impervious area, so roofs, asphalt, concrete, parking lots, etc. And it can't infiltrate like it would in the natural environment. So I think we all know also what happens when stormwater infrastructure is not managed well. This is often the only time we think about stormwater management is when things are not going well. So you see a catastrophic culvert failure that has not been replaced after its service life, and it fails and it washes out a whole road. It can happen very quickly in a big storm. So there's debris that builds up and clogs an outlet, can cause massive flooding. We see this in the news. That's when it really hits the news in stormwater, when something goes wrong. So managing the infrastructure is so important. So again, when we're talking about how we're going to meter stormwater, it's really important to spend a bit of time to think about what imperviousness means. So surfaces that do not allow the water to penetrate back into the ground, that runs off quickly, those are impervious areas where the infiltration doesn't happen. So it's water quantity, so more water, more volume is running off and can cause flooding and erosion. But it also means increased pollution because it brings more erosion and it can wash more pollutants into our natural environment. Okay, and then when we talk about a stormwater funding study, we start to think about who's going to pay for what. So it's interesting to start talking about the great variety of different property types any municipality has. And here's some examples in the town of Oakville. So a single family home, a typical property there, about 1,000 square meters, just the property size itself, property envelope. Average townhouse is about 212 square meters, and a condo, including the property around the condo, about 126 square meters. Is it not going? Is it me? Oh, no. Are you doing that or am I? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. And again, now we're looking at non-residential examples, and they vary really widely as well. You can have a small commercial, a mom and pop shops, 165 square meters, a very small property, and then a medium-sized commercial. I think you've got a Rona showed there. It's 24,000 square meters, getting really big. And then you've got the giant commercial places, 73,000 square meters. They can be really giant. So not only can your properties vary in size dramatically, but they can also vary in the imperviousness of them. So a large area that's fully impervious shouldn't be paying the same as a large area that is fully paved. So this is just to sort of talk about, when we're talking about a fee, we have to talk about who's going to pay for it and how is it going to be more equitable. So instead of metering it like we do with water and wastewater, we start to look at an area, what we call a runoff area, which is a combination of the land use, how impervious it is, and the size of it. So there's lots of work been done already in the town, and you guys have really done a great job of the asset management planning in the town. So we already know, like, the town of Oakville has a stormwater system of 240 kilometers of ditches, and you've got 690 kilometers of storm sewers. That would take you all the way from Oakville to Quebec City. And you've got 165 kilometers of creeks, you've got 8 kilometers of shoreline, you've got over 30,000 catch basins, 64 ponds, and that value of all of those stormwater assets is $963 million, and that's approximate, value and in today's dollars. And that doesn't include the natural assets that, we were talking about previously. So, we really use the natural assets as part of the stormwater system, the creeks and the natural environment that absorbs that water. So it's quite a daunting task for you guys to be responsible to maintain and keep the upkeep of that much of a asset. Okay. And other stormwater services, just to touch on, I think we've all talked about this a bit tonight already, but asset management planning, flood risk assessments, monitoring that you guys do, a big monitoring program. All of the creeks need to be assessed and reviewed regularly. There's green infrastructure renewals and upgrades, climate resiliency improvements, emergency responses when there's floodings or blockages. So, there's lots of stuff going on in Oakville Stormwater Services as well. Okay, so the feasibility study that we're currently undertaking is renewing the current funding model. So you're currently funding all your stormwater program through your municipal taxes. This fee feasibility study is looking at new ways to fund the stormwater and the climate change resiliency program that you've already outlined that you want to achieve in the next 30 years. So this is, as we've already mentioned tonight, this having a feasibility study and a sustainable funding method for your stormwater assets was talked about back in your stormwater management master plan and also in your rainwater management financial plan. So this has been something that has been recommended to move forward with, for quite some time. I would say it's also very important to recognize that it's also part of the Ontario Asset Management Regulation. It's part of the key assets to have a sustainable funding mechanism in place for your key assets. It's also keeping step with many municipalities are moving towards a stormwater fee and assessing different ways to fund their stormwater program to make sure that they have the sustainable fee funds in place to do all the things that they've outlined they need to do. Is it me again? I don't want to touch it. Did we go 2 or 1 there? Did we go back? Oh, okay. Yep, so go 1 more. Okay, I know everyone likes pie charts. I only have 2 pie charts in this presentation. So we go forward 1 more? Okay. So if we look at this one, you're going to see it's approximately a quarter of the pie chart. So just remember a quarter. So 27% of the taxes collected are from non-residential properties in your town. And keep in mind, it's all through municipal taxes that are based on assessed value, and assessed value has nothing to do with how much stormwater runoff comes from a property. That's how we're currently paying for stormwater infrastructure in Oakville, and that's how most municipalities traditionally have always paid for it. So you're currently spending approximately 4% of the municipal taxes collected go towards your stormwater infrastructure, which is approximately $9 million a year. That's how much you're currently spending on maintenance and renewal of your system. So about 73% of that is coming from residential properties. When we look at the area and the imperviousness, that runoff area that we were talking about, and we slice and dice the numbers and the property area and all of that information that comes from the data that we've pulled together as part of this project, we're seeing that the runoff area in the town is 56% coming from the non-residential properties and only 44% coming from the residential properties. So this is different for every municipality and every town that we work in, and sometimes that's different because of the different tax rates are distributed differently, and sometimes it's because the impervious area is distributed differently. But when we see a big a difference between those two, how much is being contributed through taxes and how much is being contributed to the system through rainwater, when we see a big difference there, we think that there's room to make it more equitable, to make it more fair. like I pressed it twice. Okay. So I'm going to just quickly talk about ways you can fund stormwater. And there's basically infinite ways, and you can come up with a million different ways to fund stormwater. And most of the studies that we come up with, we've found someone suggests a new one that we've never even thought of before. And it's in the details of how we slice and dice these ways of distributing the payment for stormwater. The first one obviously is taxes, and we've already talked about that. So that's all taxes that's coming from your municipal taxes based on assessed value, nothing to do with how much runoff is coming from the property. There's development-related charges. It's not really sustainable for the whole system because development charges, as you know, they only go towards growth. And then there's fees and charges like the region's water rate charge. So we could tie it to the water rate charge, but again, how much water a property uses has nothing to do with how much water runs off from the rain. And then there's stormwater fees, like a flat fee, where property would pay the same amount. So you just take the amount of money that you need and you divide it by the number of properties that you have in the town, and that's it. That's the flat fee. Very simple, but not very equitable. And then you have a fee based on the runoff area, which is the property area and the land use, and you can divide it up that way, and that's more equitable. And then you have one that's based on impervious area. So a fee that's based on impervious area where we actually look at the aerial photography, and we have quite sophisticated AI now that can determine the amount of impervious area on every single property relatively quickly these days. And some municipalities have chosen that route. So that as we go down that list, it becomes more equitable because it's more specific, but obviously more work to administer and more work to calculate. There's also grants and subsidies, which are great, and I'm sure that Oakville, like most municipalities, are pursuing grants and subsidies when they're available, but they're usually dedicated for one project. So again, not the sustainable funding that we're looking for as part of this fee study. So we'll talk a little bit more about flat fees. So you can see there the different types of properties, and just thinking that they would all pay the exact same rate. For some municipalities choose to go this way because for residential properties, because the difference in residential properties maybe is only going to be a couple dollars a month, and they decide that that's not really worth going to different, to pulling them apart to go to that different level of detail when there's very little difference in the residential properties. But a flat fee all across the board, you can imagine the giant Walmart and the little mom and shop place paying the same, that would not be as equitable. A tiered flat fee can be constructed based on different property types. So the low density residential would pay one fee, a high density residential property would pay another fee, for example, and then non-residential properties would all pay another fee. So you could have that tiered flat fee. And again, there's infinite ways you can divide those tiers. So you could have 10 tiers, you could have 5 tiers, you could have more tiers for residential than non-residential. So that's just an example of a tiered flat fee where you have low density, high density residential properties, and then another fee for non-residential properties. And then there's the variable methods. So variable methods tend to mean that it's based more on a measured value. So it's actually measuring the area of each property, either with a runoff area, so measuring the area and multiplying it by the land use, or you could have a measured area actually measuring the imperviousness. You can have a variable tiered fee as well, where you have the same as measuring each individual property, but you could just put them into buckets. So you have an average, small, medium, and large, for example. So there's lots of different ways to do that. So these are the types of methods that we're looking at, and best practices, and what will fit the town specifically is partly to do with the demographic of the town and the property distribution that we have in Oakville. So one of the first tasks of this fee feasibility study was to do a best practices review. And so this is just a very quick example of what's happening in other municipalities in Ontario, just to give you an idea of who's doing what. One thing I wanted to point out on this slide is that people are often choosing to do a different rate structure for the residential properties and the non-residential properties. So again, if you think that you've got so many residential properties, and if at the end of the day we do all the calculations, and the biggest one's going to pay $12 a month, and the smallest one's going to pay $14 or $10 a month, it's not such a big difference. And to go through that details for all of the residential properties, it's just not worth it. So we decide to do a flat fee for residential properties. And you can see that Aurora, Ajax, Guelph, Markham, Orillia, St. Thomas, they've all chosen a flat fee for residential properties, and that's why. Some of them have gone with the variable tiered rates, so the small, medium, and large kind of rates. And you see Mississauga and Kitchener have done that based on measured impervious area. So that doesn't mean you measure every single property impervious area. You take a statistically significant sampling. We usually do some in each ward, or so spread it out and get a average impervious area and put them into buckets, small, medium, and large. So that would be your tiered variable rate based on impervious area, Mississauga and Kitchener. And then they have tiered variable rates in London, Newmarket, Waterloo, and those are based on the property size and the runoff area. That's what we've talked about as well. And then a fully variable rate based just on property size in Richmond Hill. So there's, I guess the takeaway is that everybody has chosen a slightly different way, and there really are infinite ways that you can slice and dice a rate. But these are what's been happening in Ontario. And again, for the non-residential rates, because they're so diverse and so different, and the price they're going to pay can be so much more significant, they tend to be more specific. So they go into the more detailed methods. So very few are using just a flat fee, more going towards the variable and the tiered rates. So you see like the variable based on impervious area in Guelph and Mississauga, variable rate based on property size in Ajax, London, and Richmond Hill. And the variable tiered, that's small, medium, and large, based on impervious area or property size, Kitchener, Newmarket, Waterloo, and they've all successfully implemented their studies. Okay, so when we're looking at all of these options, we look at it through a lens of the guiding principles that came to us through the study team when they put the RFP out for the fee feasibility study. So we're taking these guiding principles and using them to evaluate and help us guide our way to choosing which would be the best fit for the city, the town, sorry. So it's fair and equitable, whether it's affordable and financially sustainable, justifiable, climate change resiliency, whether it supports your climate change resiliency planning, and whether it's simple to understand and manage. That's also really key. So it's all about finding the balance between the fair and equitable and the easier to administrate and the cost to administrate. So we found that some municipalities, they really want the very detailed version. They want to show that every rain barrel is going to count, and that they want the public consultation came back and said, yeah, this is really important for us. We want to, we don't care if it's more work to administer. We want to do it because we want to reward every single rain barrel, et cetera. Other municipalities say, no, we want a simple version. We don't have a lot of time or money for this. It's not something that's important to us. So it's about finding that balance. And like I was saying, every municipality is different. And as we just start on the engagement process for this project, I think this week or next week is we're opening engagement for this project. So it's good timing for you guys to be aware of what's going on with this study, is that we're going to start evaluating and looking at these and getting feedback from the community, where we want to sit on this balance, whether we more fair and equitable, easier to administer, and have a look at these in balance. Okay, so we're just going to touch quickly on what an incentive program is, and I think we had a counselor, I can't remember who asked about the incentive program. So we are going to consider an incentive program, and we will be coming back to you later in the process of this project with more details about it, about what the options are and how we're going to evaluate and what recommendations we'll move forward with. But for now, just to know that there will be an incentive program evaluated as part of this project. For me personally, I would say that the best thing I like about going with the stormwater fee for a municipality is the incentive programs, because I've been a water resources engineer in Ontario for 25 years. So like Steve, we've worked together lots of times. I've done lots of stormwater management in Ontario, and a lot of those big site plans get developed, and they have to have or OGS or an underground tank or a stormwater pond on their property to get site plan approval. But then you never see it again. With a stormwater financing study, all of a sudden they're going to be paying a stormwater fee, and you can say, well, you can reduce your stormwater fee a lot if you show us that you've cleaned it out, you've maintained it properly, you know, every few years. And it's a real incentive for them to not only maintain what they have existing infrastructure on their property, but also to build new stormwater infrastructure and retention and, you know, all the good stuff like permeable pavement and stuff. So we'll be looking at the two different incentive programs. One of them would be credits, like I was just discussing, which would be a reduction in the fee based on improving stormwater quality or reducing stormwater quantity. And then there's grants and subsidies. And a lot of times that's what we look at for more residential properties. Again, it's easier to administer, and you're probably already doing some of that. So things like getting $100 for a rain barrel or having a consultation for a rain garden in your backyard and promoting those sorts of good practices through grants and subsidies. So just to sort of sum up, taxes, the general tax levy that you're currently funding your stormwater program for, it's generally, you know, there's some pros. Obviously, it's simple to administer. It's already publicly accepted. I think it's also a very good thing when this project goes live to remember that one of the first things I say to the public is when they say, oh, it's a new rain tax, is no, you're already paying for stormwater. So people don't sometimes realize that it's not like a new thing. You're already paying for it. We're just changing how you're going to pay for it. So it's important to remember that they are already paying for it. So it is very well accepted, easy to administer. But it's not very equitable when it comes to stormwater. So cons, the property assessment doesn't correlate to properties runoff. The high distribution of residential properties that are paying for it when it's actually the non-residential properties that are contributing much larger runoff to the system. There's tax exempt or capped properties that don't contribute at all to the stormwater program. And there's also having it in the budget cycle. You know, I think lots of infrastructure has been chronically underfunded because it has to compete with so many other things, and that's very typical in Ontario, Canada, probably the world. It takes it out of that budget cycle and makes it more sustainable if it's not on the taxes. Oh, sorry, and I should also say that to come up to the level of funding that, you know, your staff have indicated that you need to move forward with all of the resiliency planning would require a significant tax increase. So that's another reason that you might not want to keep it on the taxes. Stormwater fee, you can see the pros list is a little longer. I would say that a fee is better proportioned to reflect the usage. It provides a sustainable, dedicated source of funds so that your staff can plan and move forward with all the initiatives that they've outlined in previous work and background studies. It's accountable to the public and can easily demonstrate how the funds are used. It's easy to implement a credit and incentive program, as we were just discussing. The cons, it does require some public engagement and consultation, and sometimes that can be a hurdle. But I'm going to talk quickly about our engagement program and how we're going to be very proactive in that. And part of that is being here today, talking to you guys before it comes public, so you have some answers to give when people come to you and start talking about it, which inevitably they will. And it does require some additional administration. Certainly in the first year when you're going live with a new fee, it does take a lot of effort to get it up and running, but after a year or so, it's much easier to run, and you can discuss with your colleagues in other municipalities that have had them up and running for 5 and 10 years, and it becomes a well-oiled machine. So stormwater fee misconceptions, we'll start hearing a bit about those. I think it's inevitable, though there's always going to be both sides of the story out there. So some people are going to say stormwater fees are just another tax, roof tax, rain tax. We've heard those types of things before. But stormwater fees serve a very specific purpose. So tying them to usage is really how we get away from that and taking them off the tax. And again, reminding people that they already pay for stormwater through their taxes. Stormwater fees are arbitrary. Most fees are related to an aspect of stormwater like impervious area or estimated runoff, so they're not arbitrary at all. and stormwater fees don't benefit property owners. Well, all property owners benefit from roads that aren't flooded and natural environment that's not polluted. So those are common misconceptions we work on in our public engagement. So this is the fee feasibility study and generally where we are right now. So we've done that best practices review and looked at other municipalities, and we've been working with a great team in-house here who are very involved in the process. We've started to do some fee calculations and working on what that's going to look like for different funding scenarios, but also for different property types and lots of different scenarios there, so we can actually see what the numbers would be. So we're starting to do those fee calculations. We're working on a credit program discussion and evaluation, and we're moving towards the fee evaluation, so we actually decide which fee program would be best suited to Oakville. And then the billing and implementation plan, how you're going to actually bill it, if it's going to be on your electricity bill or on a regional water bill, or how you're going to actually bill it will also be part of understanding the implementation plan. And throughout that, we're just at the very beginning of the education and public consultation plan. So our engagement objectives, and I think that when we say we've learned a lot through all of the studies that we've done at AECOM, I would say the number one lesson learned is through engagement and education. So I'm sure some of you have been following Hamilton in the news, and it's really important to get out in front of the story and make sure that our councillors are informed before the public starts asking questions and making assumptions. So the engagement objectives really at the beginning are to help them understand, what is stormwater? What are we paying for? Why is it important? How are you currently paying for it? That existing conditions is the very first piece, and it's education. So really starting with the education piece and not just right away with we're going to charge you a fee. We're starting with a whole bunch of education and understanding of the higher level existing conditions. It's also to gather feedback. Like I was saying, every municipality is unique and different, and we're going to hear a different set of input and feedback and listen to a different set of priorities from the public as we gather feedback. And then also to build public trust. So to make sure that they feel like they are being heard and that the process is transparent, and we're sharing how feedback is being incorporated into the evaluation process. One thing that we also work with these studies, part of the engagement program, is the key stakeholders. So properties that are currently tax exempt often do end up having to pay a stormwater fee. So that's going to be something that's maybe unusual to them. And sort of when we say to them, say to people that you're already paying for stormwater through your taxes, well, they might be a special case. So again, that's a piece of stakeholder engagement that's very specific. So we will target those people specifically. Environmental groups, poverty action groups, residential associations, commercial industrial associations, Indigenous groups, all sorts of groups that we can work and direct our engagement with them that's more tailored to their specific needs and concerns. So we've got 3 rounds of engagement coming up, and the first one is just about to start in June here. And I had notes I was supposed to be looking at. Yeah, the first one is coming in June, and that will be to educate what is stormwater, a lot of what we've actually just talked about tonight. How much do we need to pay, and how are we currently paying for stormwater? And some ideas of how else we can pay for stormwater. What are the other options, and how are we going to evaluate them? And get input really back from them on what the guiding principles are, and if they want to weight them differently or have new guiding principles considered. So the second round of engagement will take that first round of engagement back and help us understand, to demonstrate that we've listened to them, that is incorporated in the evaluation. So again, it's more education. How can we fund stormwater in the future? What are the methods being considered? How much will it cost me specifically? So then at that round of engagement, we'll start seeing numbers for different types of houses. So an average small house will pay X number of dollars per month under this method, but only X number of dollars under this method. They'll actually start to see some numbers. And that is, I think, in the fall, round 2, and then round 3 starts in the new year, again, with coming back with what the actual recommendation is, how we got there, and information about what the incentive program will look like as well. And I think that is where, oh yeah, so this is round 1 engagement starting in June. So it's actually starting in mid-June, I would say. So I think next week is our first, we're going live, launching the project website, promoting educational material on social media. It's a very, very fulsome engagement program that we have for this project. We've developed a new video that's shareable about what stormwater is and what the town is currently doing with stormwater. So I think that's going to really help set the stage, so make people understand the importance of stormwater and everything that's being done, and the amount of assets you have to take care of. And yeah, so that starts, I think, this week or early next week. Soon. Yeah. Soon. It starts soon. Okay, and yeah, thank you. I hope.
Thank you. You've generated a number of questions, and I want to ask if council and our guests would like a brief recess before we dive into extensive questions. And I'll just look for some kind of sign from council. I'm seeing some yeses. Are there any noes? Or could we take 5 or 6 minutes for a quick break then, everybody? Thank you. We're in recess for a couple minutes. Thank you. The recess is over. We're back together. We have our questioners lined up, and we have a final word before questions begin from Director Hewitson, who has just one slide to leave you with, if I'm properly informed. Ms. Hewitson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think just need to go to the next slide after this. There we go. Thank you very much. So Ms. Warburton talked a lot about our engagement plan. So this is a little bit of an overview of the, I guess what we're calling a roadmap. So as she mentioned, there are 3 stages of education and engagement. The first round will start in the next couple of weeks. And again, it is more focused on that education piece, on what is stormwater, why do we need to start planning for the future and increasing the funding level, and also why are we exploring those different alternatives on how to fund stormwater, and leaving it sort of at that level. Then we'll come back in around the end of August, maybe early September, with another council workshop with you to get into a little bit more of the details. So Ms. Wharton talked about, flat fees and variable fees. So we'll be speaking with you to explain a little bit more of those options that we explored and what those potential fees could look like and the impacts to those different groups that she highlighted. And then after that round, we will take it out to the public and start doing a more fulsome engagement, more formal PICs, surveys, stakeholder meetings and whatnot to really get their feedback and understanding of those different options and what that might mean for them. Then the hopes are, after all that, we gather the information and really take a look at those options and come up what is our preferred method using that feedback that we've heard both from you and as well as the residents. And come back in December with what we heard and what that preferred option might look like. And then we would take that out again to a round 3 of public engagement, just to say we've heard from you and this is the preferred option, and get into a little more details in how we might look at implementing that. As you know, we want to get to 21 million, but we could probably look at phasing that over a number of years to lessen that impact. And hope the end of all this process, we're hoping to come back to you in 2025 in the spring with a final recommendation. That's the next steps and the overall plan.
So thank you. I appreciate that. And Council, tonight's meeting is, of course, it's public. It's going to be posted on our web channel, our YouTube channel, and we'll be able to refer our residents to the video of this meeting and the the reports that we received, the presentations. And many of our residents, I think, will benefit from seeing that full map and the full route that we're going to go. And it may help them enter the consultations in a way that understands that the details are to be worked out and their contributions are valuable. So I think this is a great start for the initiation of it, because of this being a public meeting, because of it being posted on the web, people will know that the decision hasn't been cooked in advance, and we're not going out to justify it. We're going out to collaborate and cooperate and engage and expand each other's understanding of what we need to do and to discover together the ways to do it. With that, we have a number of candidates. Council, before we begin, I ask, do you have any questions for the Conservation Authority folks? They've been very, very good with us tonight, but if we're going to focus now on ACOM and town staff, we could let them have some of their life back. Okay, Conservation Authority people, we appreciate you so much, and we thank you very much for the outstanding information that you gave us. I hope that you're happy to learn that you don't have to give us any more of your time tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Councillor Elgar.
Mayor Burton, thank you very much. I really am so pleased, and I want to thank council and staff for picking this consulting group. ACOM, I am shocked at what you're saying. I can't believe that you're coming out and being so direct, and I've totally appreciated by everyone, I think, in Oakville. If they only knew what you're saying. If you could refer back to page 56 and 57, those two pages are shocking, and it's so important that people realize what you have put on those two slides. If we could do that, Mayor Burton.
I'm sure we can, Councillor. Ms. Warburton has slide pages rather than your...
Yeah, that is the perfect page. That tells us right now the existing tax method, residential are paying 73%, and on the next page, the benefits are not 73%, the benefits are 44%.
Right.
And if you flip, and if you leave it, the non-residential pay 27%, and they are taking 56% of, this is I can't believe that our consulting company that the town has picked is being so honest. This is land breaking. I can't help saying thank you, staff, for pointing this out to everybody. I hope that the director, Director Hewitson, you're not fired tomorrow, because you're a new breed. Coming out and being actually very accurate on what you're saying. I can't believe it. I love it. So if we keep going this way, Mayor Burton, we're in good shape going forward. Now, I know this morning at the economic development meeting we were talking about, I guess it was more the business side, but I realized that we are so low with what we're charging on development charges. But this will help people realize in Oakville that you actually care about the residents that are paying the taxes on the property side. This is good information. And I can only say I really look forward to what will happen in the next, number of months. I know, Director Hewitson, when did you say we're going to be, you're going out right away in June again to the public? And you'll have a recommendation back to us in 2025. Can maybe you help me on that?
Sorry, I just turned it off. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we're starting our engagement plan with just the education piece in June. And then we hope to come back to you, council, in August, early September, with some actual calculations on the fees and what they may look like, and then back out again for engagement, with the whole process hopefully wrapping up in the spring of 2025.
Well, you have done a fantastic job of getting us at the kickoff. You've totally gone beyond what I would have ever expected tonight. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Can maybe staff put the roadmap slide back up? And we can leave that up as a bit of an illustration as we continue with our questions. Excuse me. Councillor Giddings, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, for staff, could you provide us, don't worry, just in terms of the materials that will be released through our various channels, can you make sure that council gets that with the images and so on, so we can get it to our clients and residents associations as well?
For sure, yes. I think the big piece of the launch will be the video that we'll put on our website, which we are happy to share with you, because I think it is something that you'll probably be able to share out to your constituents as well. That was one of the purposes of creating this video. So that'll go on our website, but we'll also make sure it's shared with you in the coming weeks.
Great, thank you. And for our consultant, a couple of questions. You talked about variances in terms of municipalities depending on where they go with the a la carte menu in terms of all the different ways of doing it. Do you have a ballpark in terms of like a comparator municipality in terms of, you were talking monthly costs. What, are we talking $10 a month or $50 a month? Just out of curiosity.
I have slide that's on. I can give you some more details. Through you, Mayor Burton. So I could just speak in general. If I could find the slide that has the numbers on it, that would be better. But in general, yeah, it's about $10, like $7 a month for residential properties when it's a flat fee. That sounds about right. $7, $10, sometimes $12 a month for residential properties. So again, it depends how we end up slicing it. So none of those numbers have been calculated yet for Oakville. But yeah.
Because it depends on the infrastructure and
that's right.
And
yeah,
everything else.
It depends on how much we're funding and also how many properties they are and which method we choose. But for a residential property, like in the ballpark of $7 to $14 a month, something like that is approximately right.
And so one of the options is to look at the hardscape of the property, aerial imaging, AI, and that will kick it out. And if we decided to go that route, the greater the hardscape, the more it's going to cost.
That's right.
Are there any municipalities that have a system such as what we go through with MPAC in terms of them saying, well, no, you know, it looks like it's a tennis court, but I've done this, that, and the other thing. Is there that kind of process?
Absolutely.
That?
Yeah. So every municipality that implements a rate study has a grievances process. And in the first year, you sometimes get a few that do come in and say, well, actually, that's an old photograph we put a playground in, it's no longer a parking lot or whatever. So then those would get reevaluated on a one-by-one basis. Also, when properties get redeveloped, so they apply for a new system, they have to be reevaluated and be reassessed for the stormwater fee. So in the first year, you do get quite a few of those people coming in and saying, I think I've been wrongly assessed, and those changes need to be made in the database. So in the first year, you do get quite a few of those, and then ongoing, just through each development application needs to be reevaluated for the stormwater process. So it gets easier, but yeah, you get a few of those.
Bit of an initial slam, is there?
It's not too bad.
So it's possible to have a very large lot, a very small lot, and have the small lot not account for much water running off. On the other side, you could have a very large lot that's treed and gardened and whatever else. How does that?
Yeah. So, for example, So you have a runoff coefficient. It's part of your engineering design guidelines, and it's a number from 0 to 1. So 0.9 is a parking lot, or 0.95 is a parking lot, whereas 0.1 is a grassed area. And that runoff coefficient, which is part of your design guidelines, and every municipality has that, we multiply that factor by the area. So, for example, a park would be 0. So you multiply the giant park by 0, you get 0. So the runoff area is 0. So it takes into account the size of the property, but also the amount of imperviousness is there. So if it's mixed and part grass and part paved area, it would be 0.5. So you take the whole area and you multiply it by 0.5, for example. Does that answer your question?
It does, and people could avoid being charged a higher rate if they implemented a dry well or whatever on their property.
Correct. So through the credit program, so you would be assessed by the impervious area, the runoff area, to calculate how much fee you'd be charged, and then you'd receive a credit back for reduction in quantity. So either a pond, an underground storage tank, or a benefit to quality. So you could put in an oil grit separator, for example, and show that you're maintaining it. That would also provide a credit to that property. So yeah, you'd get the initial charges calculated, and then credits would be taken off based on how much stormwater management you have on your property.
If you plant a tree, does that reduce it?
So this is part of the engagement process on the credit program would be to ask those kinds of questions. And we could say, sure, we can give everyone a credit for every single tree you plant. So that credit might be on a big, 25 cents a month. Is it worth the effort to administer and check it? So that's finding that balance. So absolutely, a tree does help, and increasing your urban canopy is a very important part of LID and stormwater management. But it's just whether it's relevant or the cost-benefit analysis of doing it compared to the administrative work of checking it, and changing the fee.
All right. Last question. What do we do with areas such as ours where you have homes with 1 or 2 or 3 sump pumps?
Sump pumps.
It's a new build, and it's water that's coming off their property. In some cases, an awful lot of water.
You mean groundwater?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't think that's actually ever come up yet.
I've got more.
Yeah, so that's a good one. And like I said, there's always something that comes up in it.
Like, how do you measure that? How do you measure that? Do you hook
That's right. Yeah. So there's no meter on the water going out. Your wastewater charge is based on the water coming in. So you are actually putting a lot more water out through a sump pump that doesn't get metered. So that's never come up. So I think it's a really interesting point, and maybe something that if the town thinks that's something that we should look at, then we will look at it. So, but
all right, so it's not measured now. We'll just leave it at that.
It's not measured at this point. It's not measured.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I wish I could share Councillor Elgar's enthusiasm. I have a feeling our residents aren't going to be so enthusiastic about the discussions we're having here. And just to be clear, because you mentioned in numerous times through your presentation that people already pay this, it's just through their general tax. But I don't want anyone to think that, well, it's going to net out because instead of in my general tax, it's just going to go through something. This is an addition to what they're going to pay. They're not going to be getting a deduction in their property tax because now we're switching it to a different lane. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Burton. So theoretically, they should see a reduction if that's the way the numbers go. But in practice, that doesn't happen because the tax gets sort of backfilled with other things that are required. But in theory, they should. So maybe they're going to get more services. So that's a really, it's a very good question, and it's definitely one that comes up on every rate study. But yeah, they are currently paying a certain amount through their taxes for stormwater, and how the town, deals with it as moving that away. Like, you no longer have to take it off your taxes. How the town chooses to backfill that, it's a tricky question. Some municipalities have chosen to actually show the reduction in the first few years and then slowly build it back up again. In this case, because not only are you moving towards a fee, but you're also moving towards a much larger fee funding amount. You're going from the 8.9 million per year to that 20 million a year. So there's also a big increase in the amount you're funding. So I don't know if they're going to see that that decrease as clearly as we would like. I mean, that would be a great selling point. But it is a very difficult one to discuss, and one that we have to discuss carefully to manage those expectations. Yeah.
Sorry, and the director's chomping at the bit over
Sorry.
there. No problem.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just thought I would add that we have thought about that a lot. We understand where you're coming from, and it's something we think will be important for us to try to illustrate if we do shift it off the tax levy, looking at finding creative ways to show that that amount has come off, but yet we may choose to fill that room with other things because we do have a lot of other pressures. So definitely something we need to consider in our communication of this whole process.
Okay, thanks for that. And I think one thing that's important to understand here, and I know we're going to hear a lot from the community, is, climate change has been happening for a long time. Why now? What's going on now? And especially they're going to say, well, once you bring in a tax, you never get rid of it. So it's not like we're going to make all these climate resilient adaptation changes, and then at one point we're going to go, and we're done, right? So I'm trying to wrap my head around, what we're looking to charge a fee for. I mean, everything I would imagine that's being built now is being built to a standard that we are aiming to bring other things up to. So any new builds right now will be 2024 climate change adapted, 500-year storm, big pipes, whatever, green. So that, and that's DCable, is that correct, that stuff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if it's done through growth, then the development pace for all of the new infrastructure that's required as part of their development plan. Some of this, if it's done to adapt, to bring out the older areas of town to a different standard, that will not be DCable. So that's what's being put into this plan as opposed to the DC charge.
Right, so I'm just trying to organize the buckets here. So we've got the existing stuff that's not DCable, and that the fee's gonna have to pay to bring that up to a level that's climate change adaptable and ready, and all the stuff we've been talking about today, because it wasn't done that way over the past 50, 60 years. So that has to come up, and that's where the fee's gonna pay to but the new stuff being built right now, whether it's condos or Midtown or the Brownie-Go station, all that stuff is going to be built to that threshold right now, and that is DCable. That's not gonna come off of every taxpayer's levy bill right now, because that's new build and that's going to be DCable. So we've got those two buckets.
Correct, yes.
And then we're going to have a third bucket, which is part of our asset management. How do we start saving for renewing and getting that stuff so that in 30 years, when its life cycle is out, we've already got the money and we exchange. So there's three buckets that I'm looking at that need to be paid out. One is DCable, so there's really two buckets that we're asking people to pay into. It's the asset management, and it's bringing old infrastructure up to a climate resiliency for 2024. Is that correct?
Correct, and as well as the ongoing operation and maintenance will increase over time as we take on that new growth.
Sure. So
Right,
so then
yes.
one of those buckets should go away, and that's the bringing stuff up to time. So
Correct.
eventually we're going to be working just to have one asset management bucket of replacement and whatever the operational elements are. So theoretically, this fee should over time get smaller and dwindle down. Is that correct?
I think it may have a need and be at a higher level, and then potentially maybe come to a lower level as we get to a sustainable level of maintaining our infrastructure through the asset management program. But it's hard to say because we don't know what's going to happen with climate change and standards and policies. So we may need to continue with some of that adaptation as we learn more.
No, and I get that. Listen, Oakville might be floating out into Lake Ontario at some point. I don't know. We don't know what's in the future, which is, heaven forbid. But so I get that. When we go out to the public and we're trying to talk to them about why we're doing this, what we're doing this, and what the end goal is, I think from a philosophical standpoint, it's important to say, we've got to do stuff that we didn't have to do 60 years now because of climate change. We've got to pay that. Eventually, we hope that that goes away. We're not sure. But I think we just need to be clear and concise in our messaging when we ask people for money. I hear every single day, everything's getting more expensive. You continue to ask me to pay more, more, more. Many of us just came back from FCM where we talked about municipalities have 60% of the assets. We've got 9% of the taxation that we pay for these things, and we keep on going to the same well. So I just want us to be very clear in terms of what is the plan in the program, why we did, because we've jumped into funding methods really quickly. And I think this is going to go over a lot of people's heads with regards to why we have to start discussing funding methods, because we've got buckets that need to be paid into, and here's how we're trying to address that. So that's really the point that I'm hoping that when we do our communications and our education, we're very clear on the why before we start talking about the how. That would be my message. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor, thank you. Ms. Hewitson, could you get staff to put up your slide number 13 from the RWMP Council Workshop presentation? I think it was the first one, the rainwater management. Anyway,
Yep.
On slide 13, you have your 30-year plan, and you show the 3 different buckets, and you show how they vary over time. And for people who are watching us right now, it would probably be helpful to understand the councillor's point if they could see that visual. That's the one. Thank you very much. And we may as well leave that up for people to take in as we continue to talk about that. Councillor Adams, you're next.
Thank you very much for the presentation and all the materials. I remember bringing this concept to Ray Green eons ago through a discussion that we had at Credit Valley Conservation, and being really hopeful that we would get on with it. And I'm so glad that it's only taken maybe 8 years or something to get to this point, but here we are finally. I have a bunch of questions that are in no particular order, but there was discussion about the credit concept, and I think we all like the credit concept in theory. We recognize there's administrative issues with it, but I was trying to figure out how much does the municipality actually save every time a rain barrel gets put in? Is there a understanding of how many liters of stormwater get saved every time a rain barrel is in place, for example? And if you give a $50 credit every time a rain barrel gets put in place, is that actually the real value of putting in the rain barrel, or is it a feel-good measure that is kind of out of step with its real value?
For you, Mayor Burton. So I've done lots of studies where we actually look at the benefit of rain barrels specifically. And the assumption has to be made that the rain barrel is empty when the storm hits, so it can actually provide that volume. And a lot of times they're not. I mean, my rain barrel is almost never empty because I can never remember to use it. So when we're doing the calculation of how much benefit, it comes into like an initial abstraction in hydrology that we put a factor on and how much the rain barrel is. We estimate how many people will actually install them correctly. So let's say 10% of the population, and then we'll say like 5% of those will have them actually empty during the time. So it is kind of insignificant, you're right. I think most municipalities choose to do it because they do recognize there is some benefit, but it's also an educational benefit. So I think it's more about getting people more in tune with stormwater, the cycle of it. It's also a gray water benefit. So the real benefit is that every drop of water that they do use from it is water that they're not taking from your drinking water and taking from the processed water that's come from.
It helps in 2 different ways.
That's more of the more tangible benefit that you can measure, whereas the stormwater benefit, it's hard to measure.
Okay, so we don't really know, but we think it's a feel-good element or
From
educational
a stormwater
element.
professional, I would say, it's more of a feel-good thing, but it's definitely has great value when it comes to education and about actually people sort of sensing how much water is running off their property. They have a roof and they see that their barrel's overflowing. It connects them to how much water is actually being produced by just their roof, So I think the educational value is real and really important, and most municipalities choose to fund rain barrel programs for that reason, as well as the wastewater reason.
Yeah, the region's had a rain barrel program.
Definitely, yeah.
Forget about stormwater charges. There's been this program in place from time to time. And so I appreciate that there's a benefit to having it even from a sales of the stormwater fee perspective, if you hold out this carrot and say, if you do this, you'll get whatever the credit ends up being.
We
right?
also give sometimes credits for educational programs, which is kind of the same thing. So if a place that's tax exempt, like a church or a school, if they do a stormwater education program, sometimes we can do a credit for a rebate for that as well. So it's kind of akin to that, I would say.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that discussion. The second question is, are there examples where the fees are based on a combination of the impervious area and the total area? So it's based on a percentage of the impervious area? So there was a bit of a discussion with Councillor Giddings when he was trying to get at the issue of small lots and big lots and who has what. But if you have a large lot that is relatively pervious, and it's generating,
I know what you mean.
you know, 1,000 liters every rainstorm versus a small lot that's also generating 1,000 liters.
So through you, Mayor Burton, this has come up in a couple different ways. So, for example, Mississauga, you measure the average impervious area per different property type. So small property, large property, medium property, and you measure the average impervious area. So you really are being charged, doesn't matter how big your area it is, just how much impervious area you have, and that's more common. But we do sometimes see a large impervious area that's surrounded by green space. And so, you know, like we're looking at the city of Hamilton right now, and we've had an extensive engagement process with the agricultural community there. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard. So when you have a large impervious area, like a greenhouse, huge impervious area, maybe they're capturing all of that water and using it for irrigation, or maybe it's running off on the surrounding property. So we call that, I think they're calling it a green space credit. So you could have a large impervious area, but it's surrounded by area that's infiltrating it. There can be a credit. So it would be a unique, that would need to come up in consultation, and we would, you know, bring that into the credit program and discuss it through the consultation. But it's definitely something we can consider.
So that would be something that would be under discussion or could be under discussion?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Everything's on the table still.
Okay. And I don't know from an administrative perspective whether it makes sense to do that or not. I'm just trying to figure out if that's a concept that has worked in other places and how difficult it is to
As far as I know,
with.
Hamilton's the first one that's done that specifically. The rest of them have just gone with straight square meters of impervious area.
Okay. Then a point of clarification. So we've got the slide up here showing the 21.3 million. Are we contemplating fully funding the whole 21.3 out of a charge, or are we talking about funding only the extra missing component? Or have we decided?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have not decided on that. That is something we're looking at and kind of weighing the pros and cons of, you know, do you put it all in a fee or do you leave some on the taxes? Of course, there's complications either way when you start to think about splitting the costs and funding it different ways. But that is something we are considering and taking into how we actually plan for what's in the fee.
Okay. When I first looked at this whole concept of stormwater fees, one of the things I was excited about was the ability to get fairness on the charge with respect to making those who had giant parking lots pay a greater share of the cost. And the best way of doing that would be making the whole 21.3 million paid for through this kind of a fee, as opposed to it being a blend of stormwater fee plus property taxes. And so therefore I would prefer, I think, seeing the full fee model as opposed to a partial fee model, but I'll leave it there. And then the last thing, there was a slide that you showed the exemption, maybe it's the next slide, I can't remember which slide it is now. But you had the list of the college and hospitals and I think you had things like churches and stuff. But the one that caught my eye was the college and hospital, where we don't get to charge them proper property taxes, and we get the bed fee instead, the payment in lieu of taxes process. Are we allowed to charge them a stormwater fee? Is
So
this
I
a
would-
way where we can actually get the province to pay a greater share of what they really should pay?
So through you, Mayor Burton, I would say if they are currently paying for water usage, which I'm sure they are, they can pay a stormwater fee legally. So there is precedent. If it's something that you can connect and draw a parallel to usage, then you can charge a rate, same as wastewater, same as drinking water. So if they're paying for drinking water, they can be charged a rate for stormwater. So every municipality deals with them differently. Hospitals, airports,
Wow, this might be the
colleges,
most exciting piece of the
universities.
night so far.
And that's why we do that very specific stakeholder engagement. So you will take your 10 biggest landowners, for example, and have private individual interviews with them to hear what they have to say, understand what their issues are, to really make sure that we're engaging those specific people. And then also, the hospital boards, the education boards, we do try and have more directed consultation with them because each one is unique and every municipality deals with them differently. So.
Okay, well, that's really exciting. Thank you so much for the answers to all those questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, we have Councillor Knoll.
It's always exciting to see Tom's eyes light up when it means we're going to get more money. Thanks. The problem with coming fifth is that almost all your questions get asked, but I have a couple variations on themes I just want to explore a little bit. So on the overall cost of administering a program like this, do you have a sense of what that generally looks like as a percentage of revenue? Because it sounds to me that this isn't a simple program to administer, and it could cost significantly more to create a separate program carved outside of the property tax assessment system when you start taking into account incentives and things like that. Do you have any sense of what other municipalities have experienced in that regard?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. So for a municipality approximately the size of the town, I would say through implementation, so that first year, a consultant would work with you for the first 4 or 5 billing cycles to make sure that those difficult questions get answered, that the billing's working well. So you have that consultant for the first 4 months. It usually takes about between 1 and 2 FTEs from the town side to help run that program for the first year. Once it's up and running after the first year, around half an FTE is what we're usually seeing. So someone in your stormwater program that's dedicated to managing the system, making sure the billing file gets updated regularly with 5 to 10 new properties that need to be updated, answering a few questions, et cetera. So once it's up and running, approximately half FTE.
Doesn't sound too bad then. I just had this vision of constant fights about, no, I have this much impervious, or this, I should get this credit or that credit, and just a lot of aggravation around administering a program.
Yep, so the credit program definitely is more to administer, and again, it's just in that first year making sure everyone's happy with the credit they've been given. Some municipalities choose to roll the credit program out before the implementation so people can get their credit and figure out what it's going to be, so they never see that big sticker shock price. They see, okay, this is what my fee would have been, and I've got my credit in place before the first fee even rolls out, so yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mayor, may I just like to add to that? The administration cost actually depends on the choices that we eventually will make. If you go to measure every single property, then some municipality hired an entire team of people to measure individual properties and the changes of the property over the years versus to maintain it, while some municipality pick a basic flat fee, as Pippi mentioned, is quick set up the bill, and it just roll itself into the fee. So I think there's always an initial startup fee time and implementation. It does come down, but the scale, I'll say, between 0.5 versus 5 or 10 depends on the choices we make and how complex we want to make the administration to be.
Okay. In terms of the actual exemptions, and Councillor Adams touched on this with respect to what's the value of a rain barrel. Presumably there'll be a number of different exemptions or a number of different credits that will come up. Is there an industry standard as to what the dollar value of those sorts of items are? I know rain barrels are a little tough to figure out because some people actually use the water in it and some just become mosquito breeding grounds. But is there, for the other ones that are more tangible, like impervious surfaces and those sorts of things. Is there any sort of industry calculation as to what that looks like in terms of a credit?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a very laborious task and it's very iterative. So when looking at credit programs, we have to say, if we provide this credit, that'll take this much out of our revenue. So then we have to redistribute the rate again. So then the rate gets changed. Well, if we do this credit program, that'll take this much out of our revenue. So it's a bit of an iterative process. But once we've gone through those iterations, absolutely, we come up with numbers, and they are based on benchmark numbers through different practices. So for example, if you reduce the peak runoff by 10 cubic meters per second from your property, that could be worth like $1 a month or something like that. So they are correlated with dollar values, and they're very much like very practical numbers. So the amount of storage is a dollar value, the amount of like sediment removal based on, so if you put an oil grit separator, it's rated for the amount of sediment removal it provides. So we would look at those individually and say, and you can look at other municipalities, go to Guelph, Mississauga, and you can look at their credit program. It's very prescriptive. So you reduce your peak flow by this amount, you get this reduction. So there's a correlation, but it's different for every municipality, and we would have to do that calculation with consultation.
Is there a real, other than the public education piece and and obviously the environmental piece, is there a dollar for dollar value of a credit program versus just a flat fee across the board? So is I guess what I'm trying to say is it worth it to establish a credit program? Like it is, in the experience of the municipalities, have they actually determined it to be a good value for energy and money spent?
So in all honesty and all transparency, there is not much uptake on the credit program.
Yeah, okay.
So really, if they have a credit program for residential properties, very little uptake.
Okay.
For the large non-residential properties, of course, you do see uptake on it. They definitely want to get their fees down, and it does provide a genuine benefit to the stormwater system. We can see if you have an oil grit separator that was installed 10 years ago, the amount of times you're sending cleaning trucks to clean out the sewer downstream from there goes up and up and up. It's a clear straight line. And once that oil grit separator gets cleaned out again, the storm sewer below doesn't need cleaning out again. So there's a direct correlation, absolutely. So if they get a credit in place, if you're asking does it benefit the system and provide a service to the system, definitely, 100%.
So that's a good segue, because my next question was going to be about the different models, and we talked about the different models, whether it's the impervious credit system or whether it's flat fees or whatever the situation is. In terms of, somebody mentioned earlier, they brought up a good point that the bulk of the damage is done by commercial properties, large parking lots, that sort of thing. Is there a way to have a split system where the commercial properties are assessed based on square footage and the residences are simply a flat fee?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's what most municipalities in our experience have chosen to do. Because the difference between a small house and a big house might be $1 or $2 a month. So to split them out and have that difference in administration is just not worth it. Whereas the difference between non-residential properties is so vast.
Yeah.
One could be paying $1,000 and one could be paying $20,000 a month. So for them, it's much more pertinent to be measured individually and have a measured value, whether it's just measured property size or measured imperviousness. So most municipalities do choose a different fee method for the residential and the non-residential properties.
Okay, 2 more questions. Sorry to drag this on.
I love talking about this.
Okay, well.
This is great.
Terrific.
It's the thing I know about.
Then 10 more questions.
If you move or go past the hour motion, you can have as many questions.
No, I'm not going to do that. Now I forgot what I was going. Oh yes. So on that basis, then, is there an argument to suggest that residential should be simply blended into the tax versus commercial should be directly assessed to make the system easier?
I don't know of any municipality that's doing that,
Yeah.
but there's nothing to say we couldn't do that. I mean, if that's something, if that came up as a way that the city would like to, or the town would like to proceed, there's no reason why we couldn't do it that way. But again, I think that, tying it to, the calculation of how much they're going to be paid through taxes is still tricky unless it's a specific levy. So I think just from actual way of how you would pull that out of the taxes just for residential properties, I'm not sure, because you're just collecting a blanket amount of tax from everybody, right? So I'm not sure like how that would work from a
Well, I don't need
financial
a specific answer tonight, but I mean, can that be put on the question paper, I guess, to look at as whether that's an option?
I'd probably go by your finance department and ask like how they would, yeah, because it's almost like, would you say an earmarked fund through your taxes, which I don't think there's a mechanism for. So, but we'd have to
Unless
look
it
at that.
was just simply blended into the
Well,
into the
Councillor,
cost.
it's a little unfair to put that on the consultant, and our
True.
commissioner is in the back of the room. If you just think about the fact that the way the law requires us to calculate the property tax, we take the total amount that we need to raise less any other revenues that come in, and then we allocate that across all the tax classes. And that would include not only residential, but commercial, where I think the tax ratio for commercial, I think, is 1.7.
Yeah.
So perhaps Commissioner Sully could invent a way to do it, but on the face of it, it looks like it'd be very hard.
Well, that's why I said I don't need to go into it further. I just raised the question, and maybe staff could report back on it.
I would also mention that the City of Toronto recently tried to come up with a stormwater fee or introduce a stormwater fee that was only going to be for parking lots, and that got shot down very quickly.
Yeah.
So that was seen as unfair. So I guess that would be the only thing that I've heard of where they're having a fee just that's being collected from one segment of the population, even though like intuitively it sounds fair. It didn't go over very well, and they had to back right out of it, and they're going back to the drawing board. So
That may be the answer. So I'd be curious though if there was some sort of scenario in which that would work. So I'll leave that to later. And this probably is a finance question too. I'm just going to put it on the table. Depending on how this is collected, if this is collected on a hydro bill, for example, it would have a negative impact on renters. Potentially. So I'm curious as to how we create some equity around, or fairness, I should say, around how this is assessed to property owners versus property renters. Rental is already high enough as it is, and I'd hate to see this be an additional burden on people that rent properties in town.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in my experience, the fees always go to the property owner, and they can choose whether to download it to the renters or not. But it's definitely a good point, and one that comes up a lot is that equity piece and the affordability piece. And it's
I raise it because I know that hydro has over the last couple decades really moved towards direct billing to rental customers. So if one of the examples you gave was that it goes on the hydro bill. So I was concerned if it ends up on a hydro bill, it's going to end up being directly absorbed by the tenant. However, having said that, you're right. Landlords normally pass on all the expenses to their tenants anyway, so it may not matter in the grand scheme of things anyway. Thank you very much. I do share my enthusiasm, Councillor Elgar's enthusiasm. It was an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and Councillor McNeese, and then Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just two quick questions. The first one might be more for staff. At what size property, residential and non-residential, do we require on-site stormwater, either a cistern or maybe there's some other system? I believe it's like 3 or 6 units on the residential side. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have that information. We'll certainly get that back to you.
Okay, and then I guess my follow-up question to it is it a building, say a small residential unit, do we need to start looking at requiring on-site stormwater management like a cistern or something like that, and not just making it optional, or can we even do it through the building code?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you're coming to do a redevelopment of your house, like the single lot units, we do look through it through a development engineering process to see if there's a lot of changes. Then we do look at the stormwater management on site for those redevelopment. For, of course, the houses that are not doing anything other than a basic reno, then we don't have any controls to go in to request for anything regardless of the size.
Okay, so sometimes on-site storage is required in, say, a cistern? Or?
That's correct. So sometimes we'll ask them to put a little tank if they're doing a lot of impervious work in the backyard. So we do look at that regularly for drainage concerns, particularly on the larger homes redevelopments.
Okay, is there any need through this to, I don't know, require increased size? Just, I mean, I guess there's a lot of houses that don't have it, and you know, I guess this is sort of causing part of the problem.
I think through Mr. Chair, I think what you're asking is there a way for us to control stormwater runoff from existing homes, or even if they're not being redeveloped? So through this process, it's a fee development process. And going back to Councillor earlier questions, why are we doing this? Then it's about to manage the stormwater. It's not a way to tell a certain homeowner to say, if you want to decrease a home, you must put in a tank because you're a certain size. It's different. This is more of a funding mechanism for managing stormwater for our assets, and not necessarily imposing, whether it's through building code or changes to make changes to your house to manage the stormwater.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, retroactive, yeah, I get it, it's tough, but just, you know, kind of going upstream, or no pun intended, upstream, but trying to prevent a lot of this just from, you know, getting off the lot. You know, if there's anything we can do there, just you know, through development permits, or even especially on the non-residential side. But so I'll leave that. Yeah.
We'll certainly take a look at. There's site plan exemptions and different mechanisms. We have different mechanisms to control,
right.
and further, I'll say, provide better stormwater management to our existing neighborhoods. But there are going to be certain limitations at the same time.
Okay, yeah, so if anything we can do to just increase that standard within our rights, you know, and then I understand there's an advocacy piece to the province as well, but seems like, yeah, the 100-year storm's coming a lot quicker than people anticipated, so maybe we got to add 30% to our standard, just knowing that things are probably going to be a lot worse than we expect.
We certainly agree through you, Mr. Chair, that we should try to control this at the root, at the point where the water falls at the homes and the property. So I see that's where you like to go. And certainly we do have a full-on communication and education campaign that will continue even as we implement such fee. So then there will be many ways that we could entice homeowners or developments to do better with stormwater management.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question is probably for the delegate, but I remember about 15 years ago, and I think it was the Toronto Building Standard, green roofs was a big part of it on commercial and industrial buildings, up to a certain percentage. And I think initially there was a lot of build out, but it seemed like it sort of fizzled out or lost momentum. Can you shed any light on sort of how that program's doing, and could we reasonably expect large industrial commercial owners that have this big surface that, you know, it works well when it's sort of a sponge, but I know there's cost factors, and even though it does extend the life of the roof and a number of things, but is there any light you could shed on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have any details on the uptake of it, but I would say that a stormwater fee credit program can incentivize more green roofs, so I would say that's a good thing. And I know they are provided in the credit program for most municipalities. So if you have a green roof, you do get credit for that. It becomes pervious area instead of impervious area. So it has a very big effect on your fee. But as far as uptake and how popular it is and why people are not, you know, moving to that more solar or more wind, I don't have the numbers of that. The Conservation Authority probably would have been better to answer that. Sorry.
Okay, but the other municipalities, you do see some take up in the large commercial industrial buildings. Some are going green. Okay.
Definitely, there's more interest in it if it's going to get them a credit and they have the right type of roof. Unfortunately, my understanding is that a lot of those flat roofs are not built for the weight of them, so they have to reinforce them. It's quite expensive. One thing I would mention is that with a lot of credits, we tend to cap the amount of credit that you can get up to 50%. So, and that seems to be a standard across Ontario right now. It doesn't have to be. So it's something, again, we can talk about when we get to the credit evaluation. But a green roof is really expensive. So how much credit they're going to get back, it really they'll do their own cost benefit analysis. So maybe they'll go for the cheaper options to get the credit. You know, a pond is a lot cheaper than a green roof, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. I think we've touched on it briefly, but I just need some, I guess, in the upfront of education and clarity on this with respect to the this new fee that whatever we come up with. down the line. The concern would be absolutely, I could see it happening already. Individual homeowners, if they have a flood in their basement and they revert back, say, listen, I'm paying a fee, for stormwater, and all of a sudden I'm having flooding problems. What's the municipality gonna do about that? I'm paying this fee. So that's one thing we need to have clarification on that. And I guess the second thing would be, once we get into this fee, and then we do have a major storm and there is flooding, and our concerned citizens are coming back and saying, here we go, I'm paying for a fee, and all of a sudden we got flooding on our streets or whatever the case may be. So how are we going to deal with that in real time? And I guess I direct that to the staff for how we're going to mitigate those issues on an ongoing basis.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is a tricky question to answer. I think the one thing that we try to emphasize, and we keep saying here, is we do need to continue to reevaluate the program on a reoccurring basis. So just like how the dollar value and the needs may change, our priorities may change as well, and we could shift the timing of different infrastructure projects and climate resiliency works based on the priorities and how things are rolling out. And the change in climate, just exactly to that may prompt more of that work to be done up front.
Yeah, I guess the clarity, and help me out to understand this, the clarity is not on personal properties of flooding and so forth. It's more the infrastructure for the municipality on, roadways and ditches and soils. It's not necessarily, because we know we have a lot of, and it's unfortunate that we, in our infilling process of building bigger homes on lots, and I'm going to use in our ward, they've gone deeper into the water table and they're pumping water out like left, right, and center and flowing it into our ditches and swales. But there will be, I know for a fact that once this goes into effect, we need to be very clear and articulate that this is not going to solve their problem on their property with respect to a flooding based on a storm or or a major rainfall. It's because it might be their grading, it could be all kinds of other issues related to that. So I'm hoping we have clarity on that when we get down to, we're now pretty good, and they're going to look at this as another tax or another fee associated with it. And my last comment would be too, is that we need to have clarity in education, and even talking to some of the residents, the difference between wastewater and rainwater or stormwater. They're two separate things, but I think a lot of naivety is out there, is that, whatever goes down the drain or whatever goes in the ditch goes in the same pipes and so forth. So I think just those clarities in education up front, so people understand how this is going to work. Is there any comment on that from staff?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head exactly. We do need to spend this time now up front to focus on education for our residents so that they do understand all those nuances.
Okay. Okay. Another question too, and I did come about, is with respect to the administration. Because I guess I draw a parallel to MPAC with the possibility of appeals and exceptions and so forth, and how that creates a administrative addition to the town with respect to FTEs and so forth, and and how we do that. And I understand, once it gets going, it'd be half an FTE if this goes according to plan. Now, I guess the question has to be asked, and maybe it's a little bit early or premature. If we do have appeals, where would these appeals go to? Would they go to staff, or does it go to the appeals committee, or do we have to develop another appeals process? I guess it's the devil's in the details with respect to how we're going to process and administer this. So, can I have some understanding of what the direction would be with respect to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you certainly hit the nail on the head. Administration of this program will be something we actually have to look into. So we don't have necessarily what the appeal process will be, if any, what the credit program will be, if any. And then so what we'll do is we will come back to you, though, with the suggestion of how this program will be administered, and then you will get a sense of the actual process of if there's appeal, how is that actually going to work. So we actually haven't got to the point of developing it. We're at the stage of calculating the numbers to show it back to you, but then we definitely have to come back to you with the implementation program, which will also be administrative requirements tied to it. So we're a little further from that later in the year, Councillor, that we will come back to you for that.
Okay, and I guess my last question is with respect to the, I think that the cost of putting this together in $2022 and 640 million. When we did that calculation that time, was there an indication or a part of that 640 million indicated for administrative costs when say like at a 10-year forecast, or did we put any in for FTEs and so forth as an administrative thing? Just to give me an idea, under the 640 million, is that part of it, our administrative costs?
We haven't built in, oh, through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, apologize. We have not built in the administration cost as of yet into the 640 million. We're sort of waiting to figure out some of that implementation and what that might look like, because as we spoke to it, it can vary depending on the method that we choose.
Okay.
If I could add, actually, Ray, to your previous comment about the implementation and the costs of it, I do think we will come back to you on the implementation, absolutely. But as you make choices through the program, I think we have to have a flag to what does that do to the implementation costs. As Pippi had set out in the presentation, it really is looking throughout the process, that balance between the amount of administration and the choices you make and the complexity of it. So we'll have an eye to that in terms of what is the impact on implementation, even as we work through the program. And you'll hear about that as we go through.
That's much appreciated, Jane. I'm excited about this program, but and I also, I guess I'll echo Sean O'Meara's comments too. Things are tight, and for a lot of our residents, and now we're adding something else. We just, I guess my personal opinion is that we got to have this educated because it's for the forecasts of weather changes and climate changes and so forth. Because I'll be honest with that, we have residents that still don't believe that this is happening, and you know, there's no flooding. You know, why are you doing this? I don't have any floods in my area. So it might be some appropriate negativity in some of our feedback, but again, I believe we're doing the right thing, and I'm very excited about this program and putting it in place for the future. So my thanks to the staff and to the consultants who put this together. Good job. Thank you.
And next, Councillor Hazlett-Deal.
Thank you very much for all my council colleagues' great questions. I'd just like to get a little more clarity on the education piece. So the public engagement, are these going to be, you know, in the atrium? What's the methodology that's going to be deployed? And are the materials that we've been shown today part of that public engagement? And are we going to see those materials either in our portal or through an email?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the first round is very high-level educational materials. As I said, a lot of it is through social media and raising the attention and pointing to our website and pointing to those educational videos. And of course, as Mr. Mayor mentioned, this meeting is public and available to be able to repost and run through some of those materials that talk about why we need this and why we're planning for it now, and why we're looking at that, trying to fund stormwater differently, moving it possibly off of the tax base for those equitability reasons. So that's sort of all of the materials that it's focused on for now. As we move through the process, the next round of engagement is we're really trying to be multi-pronged. We recognize that not everybody is able or has the time to come to an in-person meeting. We will have that type of forum for the discussion in the next round. We are also doing a lot through the social media, setting up individual stakeholder meetings to have those group discussions, things like that.
So thank you.
And, oh, sorry, and the one last thing I forgot to mention, which is a big key piece, is doing a survey in the next round as well, and trying to really reach a vast majority of the town.
So my only comment would be that depending on where you are in life and what your circumstances are, your reaction and how you framed it, and I'm just have to assume because we don't see the materials, how you frame it, it could scare the heck out of some people. I mean, they may think that a stormwater fee is going to be in multiple hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and yet it's, what we've heard is it's not. And so I just, because it's not a Zoom or an in-person or a booklet. I love the video idea. When I see it, I'm sure I'm going to love it. I love that I saw the stormwater page, thought, awesome, that's great. But people don't have an opportunity to ask you a question through when they see a social media. And people can lose their minds a little more quickly lately and jump to a conclusion of negativity around what the implications could be for them. So I just put that out there as feedback for you. There's a lot of very valid, important reasons in what you've explained to us tonight, why we need to do this, and how building what will end up being, as Councillor Ramirez said, a couple of buckets of which will enable us to build back better, make sure we're ready, protect, do greater protection. But it's hard to get that from a social media pic. And so I would hope we're going to be able to have a greater level of engagement and a medium for them to ask those questions. Because you saw what happened tonight. I think most of us thought we'd be done an hour ago. And we love talking about this because we want to get it right, but our residents are like that as well.
Thank you for your comments. We'll take that definitely into consideration.
All right. Okay, everybody. That was a very good discussion. Not seeing any more questions, and I'll solicit a motion to receive the materials. Councillor Knoll, thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and Councillor Knoll's motion is successful. And that ends the work that this meeting was called for. It's been terrific working with you. We've got a lot ahead of us, and I'm sure we will rise to the challenge. Good night.